This is a More Than Just Podcast production.
Hey everybody, welcome to Season 4, Episode 14. My name is Tim Mitchell. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hello there.
We also have Jaime Lopez Jr., home of the Kraken in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
Let's go Kraken.
Let's go Kraken. Yeah, what are they doing? Are they doing like, what's the cheer? Are they like...
Yeah, I don't know because they will not play a home game until the 23rd. So they started out in Vegas.
Yeah, so there's not going to be like "Go Habs, go!" Some guy yelling in the back corner of the arena.
I mean, I'm sure there is, but I'm still getting into the lingo. What did I say? Dropping the ice and third times.
I think
third time intermission.
Yeah. Face off. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think feel that Kraken.
Goaltenders cracking.
Somebody
ice is cracking.
Somebody had posted how their little kid was watching the game and was yelling "Go Crackers!" and
Crackers.
And me being the person who I am to poke the edges of the envelope, I said, maybe that's like subtle race commentary, and they seem to enjoy that.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about. I was thinking saltines. Come on.
I mean, I was going straight where Jaime was.
Oh, you okay?
I was like, wow, he just nailed like in day one that the NHL is like 98% white.
Well, couldn't they get like sea monster shaped hats and they could be called crackheads?
That is something that I know there's some fans that are wanting to do that. It has some not inclusive sort of tones to it, so I don't know what will happen. It will be very interesting to see what happens with our hockey culture here.
Yeah, it'll definitely take on a life of its own.
When's the last time Seattle had a professional hockey team?
Oh man, I wasn't ready for the trivia. Probably like 100 years ago, I would guess.
Yeah, it was legitimately the Seattle Millionaires, Seattle Metropolitans.
I think it's Metropolitans. Yeah, because the Pilots, I think, were the baseball team.
Vancouver Millionaires and Seattle Metropolitans. They won the Stanley Cup.
Who? Seattle?
Seattle.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
About 100 years late.
Stanley Cup.
This will be one of those weird, did you know kind of trivia moments. I was aware they'd won the Stanley Cup. And it's kind of similar to my university that I went to, the University of Texas El Paso, has won the NCAA tournament, and they won it in like the 60s. And if you go look, you'd be like, wait a minute, I don't see UTEP there as a winner. That's because it was known as Texas Western back then. So, yeah, there's your trivia thing there. So if you've seen the movie Glory Road, that is based on my alma mater.
Yes, the Seattle Metropolitans won the Stanley Cup, the first U.S. team to win the Stanley Cup in 1917.
Wow. What, it was like 3 years old, the cup at that point?
No, it was a little older than that, but it was, it was a big deal. It's funny too, because I'll be curious to see if they honor that in some way, if they're going to do that. I don't think I've ever been more disgusted in my life than in the 1990s when the Ottawa Senators were reborn in our nation's capital. And this was a franchise that existed in, the 1920s and 30s, had gone away for 60 years, and then they brought them back with the same name, and then they started raising their cup banners and being like, well, we've already won like 4 Stanley Cups. Like, no, you haven't won a damn thing. Get out of here.
Yeah, it's such a Canadian thing.
Well, there are people that do that. I will poke at the Green Bay Packers who are like, oh, we've won 17 some NFL championships. Like, no, you haven't. Everything doesn't count before the NFL AFL merger. You start counting Super Bowls, right? Those are NFL championships.
How about your LA Lakers? They're the worst culprits of all. They count all their Minnesota Laker titles in their championships. Wow. Give me a break. You don't get to count those. You didn't win them in LA. They came with you when you just stole the team and moved it to Los Angeles and kept that ridiculous name.
Yeah, that's some Boston Celtics envy there.
Oh, wait, there's no lake in California?
I suppose there probably are. I don't think there's like the 10,000 that there are in the state of Minnesota.
Right. It's not the land of lakes that Minnesota is.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
Lakers.
All right. Huh. All right, let's get on with the show, shall we?
Welcome to Sports Chat.
I was going to say I should tell you though. I've been watching hockey, People's History. I'm up to episode 4, and it's interesting. And as I watch it, I'm hoping that Jaime is also taking in this this hockey lore, so he'll know more about hockey than most Canadians know, right? So. Anyway,
I don't know. I remember the training program they put us in grade school, where they just spent us a few weeks and just trained us on hockey history, and it's very important.
Did they?
No, not at all. I'm totally being joking about it.
All right. Okay. Was that after the moose carving, or?
Well, we had the whole 2-week lead up to Moose Day, and so that's every year. But, yeah,
that's true. And you decorate the pumpkin with the moose antlers.
With the antlers, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. All right, well, let's get into some more fact check now that we've got Moose Day covered. Rachel Brosnahan plays Midge Maisel on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which is what we talked about last week with the appropriation of Jewish female lead roles by non-Jewish female actresses. Or are we calling them actors now? I can't remember.
I think they're both acceptable.
Yeah, and I was talking about Edgar Wright. I saw him do a talk once on. I saw him do a talk in front of Shaun of the Dead, and he talked about one of his favorite tricks is this thing called a montage, which is I couldn't remember the terminology for it. I called it the Edgar Wright trick last time we spoke. And so I've got a clip here of Edgar Wright's quick shots from the YouTube, where they've taken some of his little montage pieces that he does, and they're like quick little 5-second shots of somebody pouring coffee, putting on shoes, putting their coat on, throwing on their hat, tells a story in a matter of less than 30 seconds of what is going on in the film without having to go through the whole sort of exploration of that as well.
Yep.
And Guy Williams was the guy I couldn't remember from Lost in Space, who once played TV's Zorro. I knew him as Zorro, I thought, before Lost in Space, or around I guess around the same time, but that was a Disney production, TV Zorro. And he also played, of course, Dr. John Robinson on Lost in Space. And apparently he, after Lost in Space, he retired. He just went, decided that he had enough, and I don't know, maybe it was just being overshadowed by a 8-year-old kid and a robot that did him in. But yeah, he retired happily and went down to Argentina or something like that and lived the rest of his life. And into the headlines we go with Jaime leading us off today. Dropping the puck.
Facing off.
Jumping over the boards and taking on a ship.
Facing off like Travolta in Cage. That's the only face-off I know. I'm learning.
I'll tell you something. The minute I heard the name of that movie, I was upset. It's like, talk about Canadian appropriation. Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah,
I cried the whole way through Moose Day that year.
So what we've got here is not Moose Day, but this was like Star Trek. It was a New York Comic-Con where we got the new season 4 trailer for Star Trek Discovery that shows you more oohs and ahs stuff of seeing the crew in their new 32nd century outfits. And they're talking about their big gravity anomaly thing that's putting the whole galaxy at risk. And they show a whole bunch of different stuff.
It's a galaxy-wide pandemic, I'm sure.
Yeah. You caught the pandemic kind of angle to it that I did not. That went over my head when I was watching.
Yeah, it seemed pretty metaphorical.
Yeah. Did this get you all hyped for what's coming up?
No, are they going to wear masks on the bridge now, or what?
They're going to be isolating their stations.
They're already social distance. If you look at the size of that bridge, they're already standing 6 feet apart.
I just want to see the plexiglass dividing all the different seats on the bridge.
That's true. On the comm.
Yeah, it's funny because we talked about how they didn't have a trailer ready for Star Trek Day, and that was sort of a weird kind of thing to not have. At that point, I guess they were saving it for this. So for those of us who weren't at New York Comic Con, it just sort of dropped on social in the middle of the afternoon. It was like, oh, okay. I mean, it looks good. Nothing in there really grabbed me where I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what that scene's about. And nothing also surprised me, like, Saru shows up and like, of course Saru's coming back. We had to assume that Saru would come back to the crew, and he's referring to Michael as captain, so obviously he's not there to come back and take her captaincy away. I don't know that it got me any more excited than I was. I am excited that this is no longer a prequel series. I think I enjoyed the foray into the whatever it is, 32nd century, as opposed to where they were previously. It'll be interesting to see what they do now that they've sort of resolved that. They've made it to the future. They've reunited the crew. They've overcome this sort of big bad in the last season. Where do they go from there? It seems like obviously this one is, not terribly dissimilar to the last season, where they sort of had this, mystery of this anomaly. How did it happen? In this one, it's another mystery anomaly, and they're going to figure out how to stop it or before it destroys the galaxy. So I think, they're all going to need to get vaccinated. I don't know if that's the next play on this one, but
yeah, it's interesting though. You think about it, that they've like. My problem with prequels is how do they dovetail them into the actual, as we all know it, stuff, right? Like there's no way that the 2020 or 2019 Discovery, technologies and all that kind of stuff dovetails into William Shatner's, Star Trek, the original series. It just doesn't work. Because I mean, even TV and acting styles were completely different. I was watching it the other day, and I'm still amazed that we used to accept that, and we never really did accept it. But in the '60s, whenever there was a tussle, you'd see a guy in a yellow shirt who looks nothing like William Shatner on the long shots, and then come back to Shatner like throwing himself against a table or something like that,
Yeah.
But anyway, my point is that it's interesting that they figured out how to get out of that sort of conundrum of where do we end this show? Like clearly they want to go 7 seasons. Do you thinking about season 1 and season 2 and the story arcs there, do you think that they were that they would have just kept going until they butted up against the Enterprise, right? Or was this angel thing, this time traveling angel deal, allow them to skip ahead to the 31st century and now have a completely clean slate in terms of what story they want to tell, right?
It's funny. I've never seen anything that addressed that, but I really do have to think that was the plan all along. Because the discussion from the beginning was, well, if they had this technology, why wouldn't we have never known about it, seen it, or whatever? And it was really from the first episode of Discovery.
You're talking about the Abro Arrow, right? Abro Arrow?
Yeah, pretty much. If they didn't put it at the bottom of the lake, they really would have had to have had a clear way out of that. And it seemed like from day one that they were in this pinch point of, well, you've just come up with this really cool effect where they're using the mycelial network and they're traveling around the galaxy over huge distances and they have this stuff. How could you have that and then never refer to it? But the fact that they wrote that into, but of course they had to take the technology to the future and they were deleted by all the, and all the records of no longer existing and whatever, that makes much more sense. So I tend to think that was always the intention, was to have it be set in the past and then be in the future.
It's funny. That whole idea of being somewhere in the future and not knowing the actual past because there's sort of a dark ages is right out of the Foundation series. Because I mean, there's a dude that turns up in the books. He should be in the show before the end of the season, I would think. It's not Harry Seldom. He has a different name, and I'm drawing a blank on it right now. So there's a fact check for next week. But he has to go back and try and figure out where the center of the galaxy was and where this Encyclopedia Galactica has gone and all that kind of stuff. And so he ends up going back to Trantor, to the library, and discovering that's where it came from. And then the next thing they look for is this mythical place called Earth, right? Sort of. But that whole idea of the whole history of how we got from A to B is completely wiped, and so they have to go back and forensically put the pieces back together, which is kind of interesting because you're right. I mean, how did they get to the future and not know about the mycelial drive? And didn't we sort of postulate, or was that actually part of the story where there was some reason why they weren't allowed to talk about it? It became like the Fight Club of warp drives.
Well, I think part of it was not only the mycelial network and the spore drive, but also the control, right? The AI thing that was like, let's just sweep that under the rug and hope that, Doom doesn't come to the universe.
Oh, Control, right. I forgot about that.
Doom doesn't come to the universe from rogue AI or the mycelial network getting tampered with.
Yeah.
Yeah, forgot about that. Did we see much of Control in the last series?
No, we didn't. I think the idea was that they defeated that by going into the future. That ended that crisis, because then we did have to follow up with Enterprise, basically saying, well, they're defeated now because they can't get control of the what was the name of the data thing that they had gotten? The
sphere?
That big
sphere. Yes, the sphere. Thanks, Jaime. Yeah, I think the idea was that once they took that into the future, then Control couldn't do anything more, and it was basically defeated in its time.
But they still have all knowledge of the sphere in this 21st century, right?
Well, I don't think they knew where it was going,
didn't it? No, but I thought that the AI had loaded itself into Discovery to carry forward with them.
Yeah, so it's still technically on Discovery, and we have the short trek that makes us think that they will eventually abandon the Discovery for what is his name? I can't remember, because it was like a character from a 10-minute episode, but like the guy who was fighting the Vidrash, that was basically the Federation was his enemy, and he, has like a sort of romance with the AI on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. And he was a fact check from before too, so he'll come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jaime.
No, I mean that's good. There was like a lot to unpack there. I mean, you asked about whether we saw Control. It was like, well, I mean, we saw them scooping up Leland, right? His remains from whatever area. I think it was the spore drive. I think that Georgiou ended up killing him in. So, right. On that happy thought, things coming back from the dead here is news that there's going to be a spin-off of That 70s Show called That 80s Show. It's coming from Netflix. And if you're...
The 80s or 90s?
90s show. No, did I say 80s? I meant 90s show. Because where I was going with this is, if you're astute, you may say, wait a minute, wasn't there an 80s show? And like, yes, there was a That 80s Show spin-off. And looking at the cast, I'm like, holy smokes. Glenn Howerton, who plays Dennis Reynolds on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, he was one of the characters. Chyler Lee or Leigh, I don't remember how her name is pronounced.
It's Kyler.
Oh, it's Kyler. Okay, Kyler Lee.
Yeah, it's
from
Kyler.
Supergirl is on That 80s Show as well. So I guess maybe this either ignores that or doesn't have to deal with that. This is That 90s Show, a follow-up to That 70s Show that stars, as it says here in this article, that we'll have in the show notes, so that you transporting home, is that it's 1995 in Leah, or possibly Leia Foreman, daughter of Eric and Donna Foreman, visiting her grandparents for the summer. So she's going to be there with Kitty and Red reprising their roles.
Oh, they're coming back.
Yeah. So it'd be kind of interesting there. They can obviously do the Cobra Kai style. Let's see who they can bring back for a cameo kind of thing if they wanted to.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, I don't know that they'll bring back Masterson, because Danny Masterson.
That's what I was going to say. I guess that he's not coming back.
Yeah, but like, of course, I think, Laura Prepon and Topher Grace makes sense. And boy almighty, if they can bring back whoever it was, that dude that replaced Topher Grace as the new guy for the last season. Like, I want that guy to come back too.
What?
There was a new guy that was not Eric Foreman, but it was like the new member of the gang when Eric went off to Africa or something like that.
Oh, but it wasn't Eric Foreman.
They didn't pull a Bewitched or anything. This was not a character replacement.
Or a Roseanne.
It was just here's a new person. What's up, guys?
Yeah.
Wow. Huh. Well, I mean, I'm happy now that they can actually use whatever, with impunity, because I can tell you in the 70s, we never said whatever. That was an 80s or 90s thing, right? I can't remember. The first time I heard it was like in the 90s, but yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, that's good. That's good. Interesting. So what are they going to do? Like listen to Flock of Seagulls and stuff? It's the 90s.
There? They're going to listen to Nirvana.
90s. Well,
it's going to be grunge.
Jam. There's be a lot of heydays of Seattle music. Right. Yep.
Or we could get even worse, because if it depends on when it's set in the 90s, it could be Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls and all that heinous stuff that came after that.
Will the Vista Cruiser be a classic car by that time?
I wonder what the retro 90s car will be. Will it be a Pontiac Aztec?
Oh, interesting.
Or a Pacer wagon?
Yeah. But I'd definitely watch this. I like those characters. I really dug that show. I would definitely give this a spin.
Okay, cool. Will they have the smoking room, I wonder?
Yeah, I guess that's... Do they sit around and smoke crack instead? Is that they don't sit around the table and fire up the ganj? They're like...
Freebase off the oven? Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah, that would be a different way to take it. Hey, here, Kurt Cobain says this 8-ball is really good. We should try this. Speedball, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, I'll go next. So a couple of weird stories this week, but I wanted to take them up with you guys because I think these are both really interesting. So there was a story a few weeks ago from The Hollywood Reporter that Letitia Wright, who plays Shuri in Black Panther, was apparently sharing anti-vax comments when she was on the set of the new Black Panther 2. And the story went out there and there was no real comment back from her. It was a few weeks had gone by, and then the other day she finally came out and spoke on social media saying, the report spoke about my conduct on the set of Black Panther 2. I honestly assert this is completely untrue. Anyone who knows me or has worked with me knows I work incredibly hard at my craft, and my main focus is always to do work that's impactful and inspiring. That has been and will continue to be my only focus. So the allegation was that she was, sharing these anti-vax views and was upsetting to some people on the set. Now, this is her denying this through this. When the story came out, last year on social media, she had shared some videos or a video that contained some skepticism about legitimacy of the COVID-19 vaccines. She then pulled that off social media and deleted her social accounts and said the only reason she posted that was to raise her concerns with the vaccine and what it contains and what we're putting in our bodies, nothing else. So she does clearly have some views, or did have some views, that are sort of counter to science. But it sort of opened this kettle of fish, and I've seen this clap back on social. I saw it happening in the last few weeks. There's been a little bit of a push. I've seen some fans out there sort of saying, so is this going to be the new Black Panther? And are we okay with the new Black Panther being potentially an anti-vax person? Again, these are allegations. She denies it. This is all very important to state. But what does this do? I guess my question to you two is, what does this do to your feelings about her and your feelings about the film, knowing that that this is sort of floating around out there?
I think for me, it's not ideal. I'm not gonna lie about that. I'm okay with separating the art from the artist in what I consider to be way worse circumstances. So I don't think it will harm my enjoyment of it, but it's kind of stinky that's going to be in the back of my head at some level.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all fooling ourselves if we don't think that there are several, if not many, other people whose work we enjoy who also share these points of view. Whether that's somebody who we listen to as a music artist, whether that's somebody who's, work inside the industry is outside of the actual on-screen stuff. I'm sure there are other people who share this view. It's one of these ones where it seems almost inevitable that Letitia Wright's going to take this sort of very prominent place at the front of the MCU going forward, and to know that there's sort of this cloud is a little off-putting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, she's got to watch out that they don't Don Cheadle her, right? And just pretend that this never happened. It's a completely different actress.
And she was the breakout. As much as people love Chadwick Boseman in that role, she was kind of the breakout star of that. Everybody knew Michael B. Jordan going in, that he was already a star, and Chadwick really sort of staked his claim to being a frontline star. But she was the one who kind of stole every scene she was in. She was really, really good in that movie. Mm-hmm. And it is a little bit, it does sort of take the bloom off the rose a little bit when you're like, oh, that's why are you sharing this stuff? What are you doing?
Yeah, it'd be like discovering that Simu Liu was like really, really interested in joining like the January 6th insurrection in the United States or something, It'd be like, oh man, really? Like you just started being cool. Like, why would you do that? Just to be real clear, that was like just hypothetical. It's not a real thing. Don't spread that on the internet.
Yeah.
I sense an aggregation story. Yeah. Lopez says
it doesn't have to be. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Like, I mean, the thing is that you can. I mean, you could. I was going to use a different political party, but I mean, you could decide. I don't want to go see movies if someone who voted liberal as opposed to someone who voted conservative is in the. See how I'm being careful about the American politics, but are you not going to go watch movies because you don't? I mean, like, let's say, are you not going to go watch a John Travolta movie because he's in that group, that weird group,
Scientology. Well, I've already taken that stand with Tom Cruise, so
Well, yeah, I mean that's understandable, but I mean that's the thing. Is where do you draw the line? I mean, can we not watch Kevin Spacey movies now and enjoy them for the acting that was done by this horrible, despicable human being?
Honestly, it does take me out sometimes. Now when I see him in films, it does set me back. Even Baby Driver, which is one of his last sort of larger roles, when he pops on there, I'm like, ooh. It does sort of throw you off.
And especially in that role, because it almost does seem like he's trying to groom the kid, mm-hmm. right? What I mean?
A little bit. Think about it. A little bit, yeah.
But I mean, like when you see him in what's the Seven, or
LA Confidential,
or even LA Confidential, yeah. I mean, in both of those movies, he's not really the straightforward, shooter sort of deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's also Kaiser Soze. I mean, Kaiser Soze is an amazing portrayal, right?
Oh, I mean, there's never been any question about his talent. He's an incredibly talented actor.
Yeah,
it's the same conversation I think we've circled back on with a few different artists over the past few years we've done this pod, which is, can you separate the art from the artist? And I think that's a huge debate that everyone has at certain parts in their lives as they become, more reflective of their values. And there are some where I think it's easier than others, and there's some transgressions where, you can perhaps forgive it more easily than others. Is it the same thing to be saying, well, I don't believe vaccines are good for you, as to say, I behaved inappropriately with underage boys? I don't think those are the same things at all. But
without getting too far down this path, but I mean, what was acceptable behavior in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s is no longer acceptable behavior. But does that mean we go back and knock over statues and take away the art? I mean, the thing about it is, I know a lot of actors personally, and I can appreciate that when they're on the set or in front of the camera or on the stage, and they portray a human being, behavior. You can appreciate the skill that they use to play that character. I mean, I'm not talking about Tom Cruise here because, as you said before, he's always the same guy.
Yeah.
But I just watched a movie. I just watched a TV show here today called American Rust, and this one actress had a scene where her husband is a cop and had just been killed, and the chief of the police comes to her door, and she turns on him they start off very congenial, and she turns on him and she says, I wish you had shown my husband as much support while he was alive as you're doing now, kind of thing. But in a very sort of angry, widowed, betrayed woman kind of voice. And as she closed the door, I'm thinking to myself, that was an amazing way that woman, that actress, adopted that person, and portrayed that, convincingly to me, right? So the whole skill of acting has nothing to do with your political views or what you do in the privacy of your own home, sort of thing, right? Or even on the public internet, The problem is we know too much about people these days and we think we know too much about people these days because of their social networking behaviors, right? But I don't know if you guys go grocery shopping. I do occasionally, and I love it when you walk through the checkout lane and you see all those magazines there that tell you that Jennifer Aniston is doing this, and Meghan and Harry are doing that, and you just look at it and you're like, really? Like it's like the epitome of clickbait, right?
Yep.
But where do you draw the line between the actual performance or the ability of that person to perform as an actor and their views? Like, what do we just, okay, let's not go see movies made by anti-vaxxers? Are you telling me there aren't, plenty of, I mean, people are anti-vaxxers are putting on masks and going because that's their job requirement these days,
Mm.
So, I don't know.
Well, that's
not the kind of debate I want to get into on this podcast, to be honest with you.
No, and it's heavy, but it does creep its way into everyday life. That's why I kind of wanted to bring it up here, and it does kind of tie into this next story too that I wanted to bring up, because it's the similar thing, and it actually ties into something you mentioned, Tim, which is what's the statute of limitations on this stuff. So the next story I've got is about the fact that there's a writer working for Marvel Comics right now. His name is Stephen DeKnight. Stephen DeKnight, the name might ring a bell because he was one of the screenwriters for Daredevil, the TV series. And he has, a pretty long career. He worked for on the Starz TV show Spartacus. He worked on Buffy and Smallville and Angel and all kinds of stuff. So he's got some good bona fides as far as screenwriting and sort of a broader writing goes. He was working for Marvel on a Wolverine limited series. And this week he announced that he is quitting working for Marvel. And the reason he announced he is quitting is because he found out that current Marvel Comics editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski once used the pseudonym Akira Yoshida in order to write comic books for Marvel while working at Marvel as an editor. And this is a story that came out years back, about 4 or 5 years ago. This story finally made its way to the surface that this is something he did. Basically, Marvel had a rule in place saying you couldn't be an editor and be a writer for the company at the same time. So he created this pseudonym and wrote comics under this pseudonym so that he could do both. And in spite of this coming out, he has ascended to this highest position in the editorial department at Marvel. And everybody was, a little off put by it, but I don't think it was enough for anybody to stop buying the comic books. And I don't think it caused any other ruffles, at least that were massive external. I think, a lot of people were kind of upset by what he did because, one, it was deceitful, and two, it was particularly around the fact that he adopted this persona of a Japanese writer. And it turned out at the time he confessed that he would do like phone interviews in character as this person. So it wasn't like he was adopting a nom de plume. He was actually sort of assuming a racialized new persona. And so there's some people that had a problem with this. So apparently Stephen DeKnight was not aware of any of this stuff when he agreed to go to work for Marvel. This week it was brought to his attention. And when he found out about it, he found the whole thing so distasteful. He basically said, I can't continue to work for this person and for an organization that would employ a person like this. So his quote, was, how does this man still have a job? This is completely unacceptable. I had no idea. I love writing for Marvel Comics, but this changes the equation drastically. There are so many great editors here. To allow a man who climbed to the top through cultural identity theft to remain in that position is unconscionable. Hopefully it won't die down this time until something is done about it. I, for one, will be contacting my editor, who could not be more lovely, to loudly protest this miscreant's continued employment. I hope other creatives will do the same. High-profile creatives need to speak out, not only in comics, but in other mediums as well. So this is another interesting one, right? Like this had come up. It had been raised. Bleeding Cool, for the record, Bleeding Cool is the website that broke this story in 2017 that this this had happened. It has been out there. It does sort of come in waves. People bring it up pretty regularly that this is something that happened and that it's been something that's been regarded as in bad taste. And in a world that is becoming increasingly focused on cultural appropriation and, adopting, other racialized things for their own benefits, this behavior is becoming increasingly frowned upon. The fact that DeKnight has raised this in this fashion by not just walking out the door and saying, like, I can't do this, but making the public statement about why he's doing this is a really big next step.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a complicated story, and it really ties back into what you were saying, Tim. Like, where does this, how long do these things have a tail? Like, is this supposed to be DeKnight's way of saying, like, hey, everybody, look over here. Let's have this person who acted unethically removed from his position, and let's try and make some change out of this. Is that the best way to approach this? Is that something that makes sense?
I don't know. Like I said before, this was acceptable behavior in past decades, right? Like, many women have taken on male nom de plumes, to get themselves published because, there was no equity in publishing if you were a female. And, but I mean, it is a little odd that he would take on a Japanese identity to sort of try and be, I guess, legitimizes his work. It's unfortunate that he decided to choose that name and ethnicity. If he just gone under the name Joe Smith, it might have been a completely different story. But yeah, I mean, like how do you when I first went for rides in the car with my dad, we didn't have seatbelts. I mean, were we breaking the law? No, we weren't. But where I mean, we weren't pretending to be, something like completely unlike what we are. I mean, the whole idea behind someone taking on a name is that, if you pick up a book written by, I've forgotten the name of the person you said, Akira Yoshida, I would expect to have, cultural sensitivities in the story based on that person's upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
and life. I mean, that the whole idea behind artists, writers, actors is they're telling a story, right? And you hope that their upbringing and experience informs the art, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, from that point of view, it is definitely a conceit, right? And yeah, but I mean, did we burn the guy at the stake? I don't know. And then again, yeah, somewhere like Marvel, I mean, like, why are they not firing him for breaking their own rule, right?
Yeah.
Notwithstanding, the cultural appropriation, like he was not supposed to be a writer and an editor at the same time.
Yep.
That was their rule. He broke that. So why is he not disciplined or something for that, right?
Yeah, and this story mentions that he was at the time, he was disciplined, that there was,
in 2017 or back in the day?
Yes, in 2017 he was apparently chastised at the time, and there was a punishment at the time, although again, since then he's gone on to become the editor-in-chief, so
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah. That okay. I didn't realize he was editor-in-chief. That's definitely something that, like, yeah, it's like,
yeah, he was an editor at that point. Now he is the senior editor. He's the boss of that group. So
yeah, that does seem wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a shady past. That should have been.
And he says that he did when he took on the Asian persona. He said he did it out of love and respect, that he was working in US manga. He worked and lived in Japan. He worked for Disney China. He loved that world. He loved the culture. He said it was like homage, not appropriation. Again, that's really comes down to intent versus action, right? Which is a murky world to get into.
I'm saying he could have written in that style and about that culture with the published name John Smith,
Yeah. Jaime, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's inappropriate in general to take on a nom de plume that is like that, where I think to Tim's point, I think I agree with, like, you kind of expect certain kinds of experiences and different viewpoints to be there. And then if you're like, wait a minute, is this, I thought this was like a multiracial writing team. Is everybody a white dude here? Is everybody secretly, hiding behind a racial mask of some sort? Like, that would be really weird, right? Like, if you expand it out beyond just as one person. And I do think it's different than like DC Fontana or J.K. Rowling. As far as I know, didn't change races of any sort, and those names don't strike me as being radically different than who the ladies are.
No, I think they were just trying to use the abbreviations in lieu of their feminine names to try and become more less identified by their birth gender than by their accomplishments or skills.
Yeah, which to me feels different, right? It definitely feels different. Like I can understand the trying to overcome, problems with writers not having masculine names. So I totally get that. I feel like it is very different, even though superficially it seems the same, right?
Mm-hmm. But if I started right now and I wanted to sort of start my writing career and I went by, JP Gomez, would that be something that would offend you?
I would find it I'd find it iffy, because it'd be like, oh,
especially
man.
If I was doing phone interviews. If I was doing phone interviews with a possibly faux Latino accent.
Yeah, that one definitely crosses the line beyond like just pretending in some online text form to be one thing is one thing, and then doing parody or caricature is definitely crosses a line for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's pull ourselves out of this one and focus on the other side of the Marvel stuff, which is the MCU. We got news this week that they have cast Adam Warlock, a long-standing Marvel character, to be in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Will Poulter is going to play Adam Warlock. Will Poulter, people may not know him by name, but you certainly know him by face. He was in the Maze Runner movies. He was in We're the Millers. He's been in all kinds of stuff over the past few years. Famously, he was in the interactive episode of Black Mirror, Bandersnatch. He's definitely a face that when you see him, you're like, oh, that guy. It'll be interesting. I think it's interesting to know that they're going to have that character in the film, and it'll be interesting to see how that ties forward. Adam Warlock, was an integral character in the comic book storyline of the Infinity Gauntlet and Thanos and that whole world. It will be interesting to see if there is any sort of overlap or parallel or anything to do with that, or if they're going a completely different direction. But they hinted at him. He is the sort of golden god character that the golden aliens are growing at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. He is the one where the queen puts her hand on the end and says Adam at the end. That's who this is going to be. So It will be interesting to see how this all ties together.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in a while, so the animated GIF that I threw in the show notes of the "wait, you guys are getting paid" meme is how I mentally viewed him. But it's a much younger man. The one from your, what is it, EW article is like, oh, he's grown into his face a bit. He's an older man now, not an old man, but not a young kid anymore.
Yeah, I think all of us sort of met him when he was a teenager and he was doing the sort of young adult roles in young adult movies and stuff like that. All right, next up, we have the news that the new Superman is bisexual. So this kind of hit the mainstream media this week, and it was an interesting one because the story was, there's a new Superman, and the new Superman in one of the new issues of his series is going to start a relationship with one of his male friends. And of course, as these things do in mainstream media, it sort of swept through. There was people who were like, oh my God, Superman is now bisexual. Superman's gay. What does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see people's reactions to this. It was on CBC, it was on NBC, it was on all the mainstream networks, got all the coverage and everything else. I'm sure it drove up the sales of the book, which is why these kind of things happen. There's been a few people pushing back saying like, stop making a big deal about this. Like, it shouldn't be a big deal. It should be, of course, Superman's. So to be fair, this is not the classic Clark Kent Superman. Superman in this comic iteration is played by Jonathan Kent, who is the son of Clark Kent and Lois Lane. So strictly speaking, it's not, your mom and dad's Superman, the classic Superman, I don't know, however you want to define it. But a lot of comments have sort of been around the fact that, in order to normalize, people who are identifying as queer across the entire spectrum, we have to stop treating these stories as stories. And I think that's where I'm coming at this particular one is, I mentioned this story not because it's news that Superman is bisexual and that he's starting a relationship with a young man in his series. It's the fact that the mainstream media ran away with this story this week and was just like, oh my God. And then the indignation on social and everything else. Oh, what does this mean? And how, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And oh, the heavens to Betsy, what are we going to do? I found it really, really interesting to watch the news cycle just keep churning this one around and people weighing in. And then, you know, I saw a headline that sort of said Dean Cain weighs in on Superman being bi. And I'm like, oh my God, what now? But then I read what he had to say. And while I think he approached it kind of ham-fistedly, his point was, this is something he was saying, like, it shouldn't be news. It is normalized. Like, why are we making a big deal of this? And I was like, oh, wow. Surprisingly astute insight from Dean Cain. Well done. So
you sound surprised.
Yeah, and then he, like, you know, shot a deer on live TV or like immediately afterwards or something. It's like that didn't go. That one confused me. It surprised me in a good way.
Yeah, it was. You know, it is a strange one. It really is. You know, there are countless characters out there. You know, the current, you know, Tim Drake, who has been, you know, Robin and other associated characters in the Batman universe since the 1990s, is currently in a relationship in the comic books with another man. You know, there are a lot of characters who have come out later or who have been incepted from the creation of the character as, you know, some area of queerdom. And, you know, it's just so funny how these things just sort of catch on and just start having life of their own. And then, you know, there's the people who are, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this to this classic character. I'm like, when was the last time you read a Superman book? Do you care? Like, it's just really interesting to watch the general public weigh in on these things, the mainstream media to weigh in on these things, and to really just sort of watch them sort of churn for a few days. But as far as it goes, you know, like, I think more and more that there can be this normalization in books, great, but it has to be part of organic storytelling, or otherwise it's just sensationalistic, and it has to be part of, you know, normalizing it to the point where when X character comes out next time, that it may be a big deal in the comics community because it'll be, oh, well, I didn't realize that character had those feelings, and let's explore that. You know, what does this mean for this character to have realized they have these feelings, or whatever it is, but not, oh my God, it's going to be on the front page of USA Today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm hoping that they commit to it. Like, the thing I'm cynical about is if they'll back off on it and retcon it in some way, you know, leaving it just a gimmick versus... Like, I don't want Purple Kryptonite to be like, oh, that was why what happened, you know? Like, that'd be really insulting in multiple levels. Like, I want to just be like, you went this route, cool, that's fine, have no problems with that, but you got to stick to it. Don't, you know, don't undo it based on other factors. Don't let anybody retcon this. It's like, oh, it was mind controlled by, you know, such and such. Or, like, it's just got to be, like, a part of the character. Like, way down in the comments, somebody posted a DC Pride I don't know if this is an actual comic or if this is a poster or what this is, but like Batwoman I'm aware of. I didn't know about the Question. I think that's Dreamer. I kind of understand Poison Ivy, and I'm less familiar with Green Lantern and Flash. I'm not sure what that is there in the corner.
Yep, there's a whole bunch of characters that have been, again, either established or retroactively established, including the classic 1940s Green Lantern, who is an older man who... He came out many years back in the comic books, and it was one of those, you know, later in life coming out stories. And it was really kind of lovely that they were like, yeah, coming out is not something that happens necessarily when you're 12 years old or 14 or 18 or whatever, that this is something that people come to later in life. You know, again, those kinds of stories are really poignant and beautiful and speak to the spectrum of humanity. And you know what? And I wasn't on the front page of the frickin' newspaper because... It was, you know, the vintage golden age Green Lantern, but, you know, you put the word Superman and gay or Superman and bi, and people are like, ah!
Yeah. With one of the very recognizable three, you do something with Superman, Batman, or Wonder Woman, it's going to get a lot of news. I think Flash, Green Lantern, Aquaman, you can do more with those, and people won't know it if they're not really closer to the comics area right? But like there are people in like parts of the world that are completely untouched that like know who Superman is, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, arguably the most iconic character created in the 20th century. It's funny though, because I think if you looked at this story, if you said to people, oh, Superman's coming out as bisexual in the next comic, they would have been like, oh my God, Clark Kent's bisexual. I'm like, yeah, well, that exactly right there nails what how connected you are to this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like Superman is Jonathan Kent. Like that's speaks to that disconnect, right? People are all ready to get up in arms about these things, but they don't really know and they don't really care. They like to fight about stuff and well, why do they need to change this stuff? Back in my day, like, oh my God. Anyways, all this to say, it was an interesting week to sort of follow the mainstream media as I'm in sort of both worlds. I worked in traditional media and also worked in new media and continue to work in new media. It's been fun to watch these worlds just sort of bounce off each other. Because if you read these stories on a lot of the sites that I frequent that are sort of more catering to the world that we're all interested in, a lot of them were like, man, everybody is flipping out over this. I wish they would calm down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So speaking of the comic book world, we also got news this week that we are going to see a much beloved comic series return. So Saga, which is a comic by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, went on hiatus a few years back after completing sort of the first half of its story run. Saga is one of the most acclaimed books of the last decade and really sort of brought a whole new audience in. Brian is a very talented writer. We've talked about him before. Famously co-created Y the Last Man and many other popular series, has worked on a lot of mainstream stuff and worked in television on shows like Lost and all kinds of other stuff. He is a beloved writer and he's a very talented writer. And this book really clicked with a lot of people because it has a lot of interesting portrayals. It's set in sort of a far-flung part of the universe. It has very, very diverse characters. Again, we talk about sexuality. There's lots of different spectrums of sexuality and relationships and all kinds of stuff in this story, and it's really, really, really excellent comic book storytelling. The point is, this book basically went on hiatus after issue 54, hasn't been around for a number of years. It was always their intention to sort of take a break, creatively recharge, make sure that they have everything they need all lined up where they can basically now go monthly from here to the end. And they wanted to do the second half of the story, which is expected to be another 54 issues. And 55 is going to hit the streets in January. So this book is coming back. A lot of people were sharing this on the socials this week, really excited. And it's one of those books that's sort of clicking outside of the mainstream too. There are a lot of people who, the number of times that I've been in a comic store or talking with people who say, oh, I don't really read comics, but my friend gave me Saga and I really liked it. Or when I go into a store and somebody will come in inevitably and say, well, I want to get some books for my, teen or tween or whatever. Where can I start? That's one of the first books that I hear comic store proprietors or staff saying, hey, actually, if you're going to start somewhere, this is a great book to pick up and really sort of dive into. So it's really cool, and I think it'll be really fun to see where they take this for the second half. And I know I'll be reserving my copy here on out. I read that one from day one and I've loved every moment. So I'm looking forward to that one coming back a lot.
Yeah, I haven't read this one, but the art is familiar, so I've probably seen it on the shelf or something. So
yeah, I recommend. It's not a super heavy read. It's not it's not Alan Moore. It's not Neil Gaiman. It's not just like meticulous word crafting, but it's very character focused. Brian's really good at making characters that are really, 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 well defined and well realized, and this one definitely really leads that. There's a lot of characters where you fall really in love with them and you really care about what happens with them, and it's a long story too. It doesn't just sort of follow a week in the lives. It's following years of these people's experiences, and it's really, really, really good. I recommend.
Jaime, over to you.
So we've talked about Cowboy Bebop coming as a live adaptation to Netflix, but the original anime is also coming to Netflix on October 21st, which is interesting. I'm excited for this. I will go contrary to this article from The Verge that says, so you can watch it all before the live action adaptation. I do not recommend doing that. I am a strong believer in going with the thing that you think is good, but not as good as the other thing, and start there. So I recommend watching the movies before you read the book, sort of thing. So I don't know what's going to happen with the live action adaptation. I recommend you watch that first. And then if you like it or don't like it, watch the original anime, which you definitely will like. Just go up, don't go down. You know.
So
Cool.
so give us the quick the 30-second synopsis. What's Cowboy Bebop about, and why did it resonate?
So it's from that 90s era of anime. It's definitely going to feel very 90s. It's, space cowboy. This gang of folks that goes and does jobs. I'm trying to think of other things that have been clearly inspired by Cowboy Bebop that run into it. I feel like Firefly isn't that far off of Cowboy Bebop in terms of feel, and it's kind of unorthodox in the kind of characters it has. And I apologize, like I'm doing a really bad job of recapping because it has been like decades since I've seen this on Cartoon.
That's all right. You're
on
forgiven.
Cartoon
That's all
Network,
right.
so I probably should queue it up on Netflix or just watch the live action one. It had such a cool and distinct style that I don't think I've seen too many places take on. It's not quite Blade Runner-esque. It's a little bit happier than that, but it also feels kind of grounded too, where it's just a little bit beyond the current day tech. Well, I mean, yes, they do have like spaceship stuff. Yes, they do have like bionic arms and stuff for some characters, but it feels like you could largely take the plots and put them as like an 1800s Western, and it would fit just about as well.
How long has it been around? Like,
it is from the 90s. I'm trying to think of mid 90s, maybe. But that might just be when it came to America, because it, historically back then it would be like 5 to 10 years before something would come over, right? I think Neon Genesis Evangelion was like almost a decade old by the time it came to the US.
Cool. All right.
Couple of things to finish us off, both to do with Canadian actors. Captain Kirk has been to space.
Both actors who work together.
That's true. Captain Kirk has gone to space. So William Shatner, 90-year-old former Captain Kirk actor, has been in space now. He flew up on Jeff Bezos's Phallus rocket into space this week, and 100 kilometers up in the sky, and came back down and was very excited. Talked about how I don't know if you guys read his comments, but some of his comments were not unlike something that you'd hear from a 90-year-old person. He came back down and was talking about oh God, where's the quote? He had such a great weird quote. Oh no, I've lost it.
Did he remember what he had for breakfast the same day?
Yes, it was all over the person next to him.
Did you see the meme that somebody went in and photoshopped all their shirts so that he was wearing gold and they were all wearing red, and the caption was the crewmates are all worried about going up with him?
Yeah. He was sorry, I can't find the quote. It's not in this story. I grabbed the wrong story, but he was talking about he was talking about basically just like, is this like death? Is this what death feels like? It's just pure black. Is that what death is like? I was like, is that what you think about when you're 90? Like, this is really depressing stuff, Bill. Stop it.
It's like right in your face of the death is not off in the distance. It's like, in that I don't know, Chevy truck or whatever it is right next to you. Like, I'm just here hanging, just waiting just in case, it's time.
Yeah, but still kind of a cool story. Again, he is now officially the oldest person to have ever gone into space. So I'm sure that will be broken in a matter of time, but still kind of interesting that he was the first non-Genarian to be flown into space, our very own.
Also the oldest Canadian to go into space, too.
And also the oldest Canadian to go. Well, he'll probably have that record for a while, because that's a different distinction.
We were kind of wondering, like, is he paying for this, or
I think this was
promotional
promotional gravy for Jeff Bezos. I mean, come on.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Bezos took it on the chin last time, if you'll pardon the pun, based on his phallus rocket. But he really took it on the chin last time because, you know, he was up there and it was him and a bunch of people that people didn't really know a lot about. And people were like, this is pure vanity. What the heck? You know, this time he's, you know, engendering a little goodwill with what he's doing because, oh, look, he took Captain Kirk with him. It's still the same thing. It's still a vanity project by the richest person on the planet. I mean, whatever.
True.
And speaking of Canadian actors, I had to bring this one in, and I was trying to figure out how to work that into our conversation earlier about Kevin Spacey's. But Christopher Plummer, our beloved Canadian iconic actor, Christopher Plummer, is getting an official Canada Post stamp. Well deserved. It is actually a lovely stamp. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at this story that's on the CBC story we've got here.
It was on the news yesterday. Yeah. And apparently he had a chance to review it before,
that's
before
nice.
he died.
That's nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, he, of course, he passed away in February at the age of 91. He was an absolutely iconic actor for decades. And yeah, he's getting a commemorative stamp that portrays him in a bunch of his iconic roles and commemorates his life and his passing. So yeah, it's beautiful that, you know, and the main character that is in the center of this is his portrayal of Prospero from the Stratford Festival production of The Tempest, which, you know, it may not have been his most widely known role. That's probably in Sound of Music, but I think especially for Canadians who valued him as an actor on stage as well as screen, I think that's a beautiful tribute to him.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I think he played that role just a few years ago in Stratford.
Yeah.
There was a couple of big names that came back. I think Colin Feore was there as well recently.
In his lifetime, he won 2 Emmys, 2 Tonys, and an Academy Award.
Nice. Right. Yeah, he got one late in life, right?
He did. He played for his role in Beginners, which we just talked about. This is somebody who comes out late in life.
There you go.
I don't understand why General Chang is not on here. Like, I'm not going to deny that these are iconic roles, but I'm like, you need like a little sticker or something that you can put on top of that to fill in the gap.
Well, surely by now there's a Star Trek stamp that you could just like stick on next to this one and be like, and also, cry havoc, and let slip the dogs of war.
Yep. Once more into the breach.
I'd pay real money to have him shut up.
Alrighty. Well, it's that part of the show, kids, where we start talking about a Star Trek thing, and this time it's I believe the season finale of Lower Decks, season 2, episode 10. What's the title of this one, Jonathan?
The title of this one was First Contact.
Oh, First Contact. Yeah, well, it's interesting how you read it that way. It's like, I don't know if you've seen the new show with Jon Stewart. It's called The Problem with Jon Stewart. And he's like, can't we have a comma in there?
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, when I first saw First Contact, I'm like, what? But yeah, you'll understand by the end of our talk here. So off you go, John. Let's hit us up.
Is it me? I thought it was Jaime.
It's me. I did not write my name or notes in there,
man.
But in the new realm of doing recaps kind of lighter and less moment by moment, let's give the sort of highlights, right? So you've got the Cerritos that's going to be working with the USS Archimedes, which I thought was a refit Excelsior, but the internet tells me is actually an Obena class starship that is inspired by the Excelsior, but is like if you took an Excelsior and gave it sovereign USS Enterprise E stylings to its look. So it looks cool. It looks snazzy. So the Archimedes is captained by Sonia Gomez, which sounded familiar to me. And I, again, had to go back to the internets. And they say that is one of the ensigns from TNG who spilled like coffee or something on Picard and embarrassed herself. Do any of you remember this? This was digging really deep into the lore.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. I must admit that's a pretty deep cut if they got that.
Yeah. So I mean, it is not a career limiting move apparently to do that. So she can, she's captain. They're gonna work together. They're gonna do some sort of first contact with this planet where it's like, okay, one ship, the Cerritos, is gonna hang out just a little bit further, outside of sort of visible orbit because you don't want to seem like an invasion, and it's usually the thing is that the Cerritos is second contact, right? And they're there to set up the communications relays and etc. So they're gonna let the Archimedes go and as a capital ship go get the glory of first contact, right? Unfortunately, there's like a solar flare or something that causes what did it cause? Like an asteroid to explode, some sort of rock to explode, and it has this weird
planetoid. Yeah, I think they say there's a planetoid between the planet that they're going to and its sun, and basically the thing lets out a solar flare and fragments this sucker, and basically sets it off like a giant EMP bomb.
Yeah. So you end up with Archimedes adrift, but unfortunately, due to momentum and the gravity well of the planet, is like 20 hours away from catastrophically crashing into the planet. Right, so that sets up the whole sort of framework for the episode, where the Archimedes crew is trying to figure out, how to save itself, and the Cerritos is going to have to figure out how they can save the Archimedes, given that they don't want to encounter the same EMP kind of problem, given that their hull, for example, is magnetized, and that's a problem, and just warping around it or through it is not an option. So that's sort of the outer layer of what would normally be considered the A plot. The B plot ends up coming around in the fact that Captain Freeman has been offered a promotion, and Becky with the good hair, Mariner, is in, I don't know, she's like somewhere, but she overhears this, right? I don't remember exactly. She's like in the hallway or something.
But she's smuggling, right? She's trying to smuggle things. She's on the space station trying to smuggle contraband.
Yeah. She was doing nutty things that she tends to do, and she overhears this of like, the captain's gonna leave, and I guess Starfleet doesn't like wholesale taking command crew along, so it would basically just be just the captain leaving, right? And since she does not like abandonment, as she to this day continues to sting Boimler over his abandoning her to go to the Titan, this is a problem for her, and she cannot wait to tell the other folks in the senior staff, and she goes to bug them in their lunch and be like, hey, guess what I know, sort of thing. So that's kind of like the B story. And then you have the C story, maybe C and D story, related to Rutherford and Tendi. So Rutherford is having all sorts of weird glitchy issues with his implant, where it's like, giving you the command prompt warning, like right in his face. He like literally can't see out of one eye because it's throwing stuff up. And Tendi is really worried because she overhears some conversation from her commanding officer, Dr. Tana, saying like, oh yeah, she's not cut out for medical, and like sees her own record deleted from the sickbay database, right? So she's worried about like, oh no, they're like going to kick me out of Starfleet. And, we end up, with along the way somewhere the crew, while they're trying to figure out how they can, solve the problems, we found out some things along the way that are kind of interesting. So going backwards from the C and D stories back to the A story. So Rutherford, the reason he's having these implant issues and these glitches is because he's running out of storage space on his implant. And why is he running out of storage space? Well, because he was so traumatized by losing all of his memories of his friendship with Tendi that he has taken it upon himself to store redundant copies. I think he has 3 copies of every memory of her, right, of his time with her. Yeah. Which I think is interesting, because they've definitely this season been pushing a lot of the more than just friendship angle with those two, I think. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not even clear that the two of them even know it consciously, but it's like they're in the background. Part of the thing that he was doing with Tendi was like, oh, well, if you're going to leave the ship, let me take you on a nostalgia trip among all the favorite places in the ship. And that's where they ultimately end up, in the captain's yacht, which we'll come back to. Right. So somewhere along the way, I think Mariner and Captain Freeman are arguing, because I think by this point it's become obvious that Mariner gave out the secret of Captain Freeman going to leave the ship. And from Captain Freeman's standpoint, he's like, look, I was going to tell the senior staff when it was the right time. All you did was screw things up, right? by not by just dropping it in there like a bomb, like you usually do, and not letting me, massage the people side, because the senior staff was acting up, right? They were like, I can't even remember the quotes. Jonathan, you might actually have one of these quotes, but they were getting like real snippy when the captain's just asking for normal things like, how are those phasers doing? And, take us out of here.
Yeah, no, there was definitely some good ones there. Very passive aggressive stuff from Shax and from the rest of the bridge crew, Billups, and Billups just loses his marbles at one point.
Yeah,
just starts swearing
and drops F-bombs. Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, Captain Freeman had decided to do the Starfleet captain thing of I'm going to go get in the shuttlecraft, or in this case, the captain's yacht, and I'm going to go self-pilot the thing and go do the deadly mission. And Mariner followed along. Is like, what are you doing? You haven't piloted one of these things in a very long time. It's a suicide mission, and this accidentally gets overheard by Rutherford and Tendi, who just happened to be there by the happenstance in their nostalgia trip area, right? And they realize, oh wait, the whole problem we have here is we've got this magnetized hull, but if we get rid of all the plating around the ship and we just go on thrusters, we could hypothetically make it through. It will be painful. The ship is going to take a beating, but we can maybe get through the whole minefield of debris from the planetoid to go save the Archimedes, right? And that sets up some really cool things where the entire Cerritos crew, Cerritos Strong, I think they say, right, that they get everybody available to go do these really dangerous spacewalks with the cool magnetic boots, and try popping off all the metal panels, the magnetic panels off the ship. I think somewhere along the way they ended up having to try to get one last panel off because it was damaged, and apparently the only access point is through cetacean ops, which got me real excited as soon as they mentioned that. It's oh, they've mentioned this a few times before in the past of are these going to be whales? And it sort of is porpoises, I think, of some sort, or maybe some smaller dolphin-like whale.
Yeah, beluga, I think maybe beluga whales.
Yeah,
I think they're supposed to be beluga whales.
Yeah, and they're floating in the water. They've got their gig. They're very keen on people getting skinny dipping or something and joining them in the water.
Yeah, their names are Kamolu and Matt.
they were great, just speaking in their squeaks that then have the subtitles,
and they keep hitting on Rutherford, which is really funny.
Yeah, it was oh, okay, yeah, I'd love to get in the water, but there's no time right now. we just need this panel to be removed. And they're well, it's through there underwater, but it's not flipper friendly, right? We can't do it. So after
it's not designed for
flippers, which who decided on that when your crew who's hanging down there is underwater?
Get really irate.
Yeah. Yep. And, Mariner was going to try sacrificing herself here in a heroic way. And Boimler was like, man, I'm tired of your crap. Obviously, you have this problem with abandonment, and that's why you're mad at your mother. You go talk to her. And he sends her off to the bridge. She kind of, kisses and makes up with her mother. And the mother's like, hey, let's just hang on to that. Stuff is dangerous here. We literally don't have a front of our bridge because Commander Ransom wanted, to have some sort of way of seeing what he's doing and piloting, so they just went the force field route in front of the open to space bridge while they're all wearing their suits. Boimler, has to go do the heroic movement of going underwater, fitting through the very tight corridor, and trying to unlock the I don't know, it was the manual gauge or something.
The interior release for the thing.
Yeah.
Tim, am I alone in getting the Poseidon Adventure vibes off of that scene?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Jaime, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Poseidon Adventure. I think they remade it at some point. It was a 1970s disaster flick about a ship that gets knocked over by a tsunami, and then they have to try and find their way out. At one point, one of the people does something exactly the same, has to go underwater and release this valve that's going to save all these people. That scene is almost shot for shot.
Oh, nice. I've seen a Gene Hackman one, but I don't think that is the 70s.
Okay,
I've seen that one. Yeah,
and he ends up dying. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do play with that in this one.
They did that in the Octonauts too, for the record, by the way.
Your knowledge of Octonauts lore is really truly inspiring, Tim.
So he does end up saving the day in terms of releasing that final panel, which makes it easier for Ransom and crew to get through. They are able to tractor beam the Archimedes before it crashes into the planet, which is great. As things are wrapping up, including Mariner, who almost flew off into space until what was her semi-rev? Was it Jenny?
Jennifer.
It's Jennifer.
Yeah.
Jennifer, saved her. And they have kind of a moment of like, I thought you hated me. No, I thought you hated me because you treated me bad. Like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of do that, to people that I'm interested in. And we end up recapping, putting an end cap on what Tendi's situation was. And with Dr. Tana saying like, hey, your potential is wasted here in sickbay, right? Like, you're so good. I'm actually pushing for you to have, senior science officer training. And that my quote of like, oh, like Jadzia Dax. And Dr. Tana was like, Jadzia Dax, who the hell is that? No, like Spock, which I thought was an interesting, kind of an interesting lore building thing. As I take an aside here, like there have been some folks on the net who've been like, well, they're kind of mentioning and knowing too many different people, and other folks like, well, I mean, look, man, we have Twitter now. Like, what the space Twitter probably has the cool logs of what the Enterprise and DS9 are doing, and I thought it was kind of.
Yeah, those would still be big news events amongst the Federation, right?
Yeah. So I thought it was realistic that, like, you might have somebody who's like, who the hell is Jadzia Dax? Just because she's an important character, from the stories that we saw in the audience doesn't mean that the average person on a California class ship necessarily knows who that is, right? But Spock is like a
icon.
Yeah, iconic, right? It's like a founding figure of who your modern era is.
It doesn't hurt if you live for 200 years.
Yeah, exactly. I think somewhere around here is where we find out that Rutherford needs to delete his redundant memories and just keep the original, so it's kind of less safe than what he wanted, given what he went through. And he receives this after doing that and sort of rebooting the device. I think he receives this weird flashback about really strongly implied that his implant was not something that he wanted to get. It seems like somebody did it to him, right? And it gave him false memories.
Yeah, nice little Easter egg that plants some seeds for next season.
Yeah, man. And then, in this final sequence here, we get some good stuff for next season where, Starfleet, ships come to help repair the Cerritos, help repair the Archimedes. The Captain Freeman has her first contact, or first contact, depending how you prefer. And they get like super drunk, and so she's happy, and she just kind of assumes like, oh yeah, like that promotion was going to come. Starfleet is here. They have this ship that's coming to escort her. She's like, oh, I'm just going to turn it down. I can't leave the Cerritos. This is my family, right? But no, it turns out that was actually Starfleet security who is here to arrest her because she is implicated in a bombing on the Pakled planet, right? And they take her away in shackles, and that is your Mr. Worf fire dun 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 cliffhanger for the season finale.
Yeah, they did the perfect to be continued exactly like they did at the end of that episode, right? Yeah, this was it was certainly more eventful, maybe a little less funny, but certainly a little more plot advancing than the past few weeks. The there was the thing with Rutherford. There was a thing with Tendi, so we get sort of Tendi set up for next season. She's going to this different department. We get Rutherford with the mystery of what's going on with his visor. We get Mariner having this sort of breakthrough with her mom as well as with Jennifer. And I'm not sure if there's an implication there. Is the idea that she's supposed to have connected with Jennifer as a friend or as a suitor? Because they, again,
really?
Well, maybe? I don't know, because she says, "I like you," and I guess I do that when I like people, and then the two of them walk over holding hands. Again, that could be a sign of friendship, or it could be a sign of something else. Which I mean, I don't think they've ever really come down on any kind of sexuality preference for Mariner. It seems to me like she would be pansexual based on the type of personality that she has. As she says in this one, I'm a Kirk style free spirit, and it super intimidates people.
Yeah, she did seem kind of fluid in a few other episodes that I think I've seen.
Yeah, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if that pays forward as well. Boimler, doesn't quite get as much, but then he's gotten a lot of love over the past few episodes. So, in this one, really all we get from him is that, he sort of nobly is willing to sacrifice himself. He almost dies and then comes up with the gem, which is, I guess, when you almost turn in whale pee, it makes you not sweat the small stuff anymore, Good episode for them, but yeah, it definitely really is. It is a classic Star Trek cliffhanger. We get this, in the last couple of minutes, you realize like, oh, this isn't wrapping up. This is all carrying forward, and we're gonna have to wait, 9 more months or whatever.
Well, they're going to have to go and rescue her now because she's going to be wrongfully tried and sent off to Rua Pente and all that stuff, right? So,
I wanted to bring us back. I put something into our show notes here. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at this one. So that they made a reference earlier in the beginning of the episode when they're talking about, Mariner is telling her lower decks friends about Freeman moving on, and they're like, yeah, well, it happens. Captains move on. And she's like, I don't want a new captain. What if we end up with a weirdo who's like, comes on board and has a riding crop? And I was like, God, why does that sound so familiar? So I looked it back up, and of course, it's a reference to Star Trek 3, where Captain Styles, who is the then captain of the Excelsior, is, he's the sort of arrogant captain of this new generation of ship, and he's the one who's like, ugh, they're trying to steal that old dinosaur, the Enterprise, eh? Well, let's go catch them. And he's sitting at his his command chair, and he's holding a riding crop.
Right.
Inexplicably, it's never addressed. I don't know where it comes from, but this lunatic is holding a riding crop on the bridge of a starship. So again, hell of an Easter egg. Well done, writers. Great little drop-in line that you got to dig for, but man, that's a great pull.
That is a good find, because I heard the riding crop thing. I did not make the connection to the pretty well placed. I mean, we talked about this being an Excelsior inspired design for the Archimedes. So having that in the same episode is definitely, I think, not a coincidence, given that captain of the Excelsior, Star Trek 3. Yeah.
So we've got to the end of season 2. We do have these sort of cliffhangers. Do you guys have overall feelings about where season 2 went, and whether we liked it, and I guess where we're going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if it has like a sort of Rick and Morty kind of vibe to it in terms of like long story arcs, but there are definitely some stories growing in the Lower Decks lore, some sort of backstories that are developing. It's going to be interesting now to see what's going to happen. I mean, the whole, the captain gets taken away, it's not the first time we've seen that kind of thing. We had Locutus, you guys mentioned Worf. That's not the first time we've seen a sort of, what's going to happen? Tune in next time,
Yeah, it became a hallmark of TNG starting in season 3 and carrying forward, right? That they were sort of ending on all these cliffhangers, some better than others for sure.
Yeah.
And we did, to be fair, last season we didn't end on a cliffhanger quite like this, but we did end up with Boimler leaving, right? That was sort of the big,
right.
Hey, wait a minute, that's a sort of paradigm shifter. Where do we go from here? And they did resolve it relatively quickly in season 2. I wonder if some of these will have a longer tail. Now that this show's got some legs, they know that they're pretty sort of secure in continuing the show for a while. I wonder if they'll have all this stuff wrapped up in a third season, or if it'll sort of, some of the stuff will sort of continue as we go. But I think this season was a really, and it's a real high wire act too. It was such an excellent balance of, Star Trek storytelling and just flat out humor. They really did thread the needle on this a few times. There were times where I was like, damn, this is good Star Trek. And there were times where I'm like, damn, I have to pause it because I'm laughing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I liked the balance that they found in kind of the latter half of season 1, and I think they continued into season 2, and that it's it's a little less Rick and Morty-ish. And so tonally, I think it's found a better balance of having that heart and TNG flavor, but more on the comedic side that I think have really found their groove, I think, this season.
Yeah,
and they've done well with the A, B, and C plot sort of idea, like the whole idea of having some long-running arcs and that kind of stuff, but to be able to tell 2 or 3 stories at a time and keep you engaged.
Yeah, right? in 30 minutes or less. I mean, normally you have, you know, the hour, I guess, 45-minute show. This is what, like 22-ish, 25-ish minutes?
Well, this one was almost 30.
Yeah, but I mean, like in general, right?
They creep up
like they're able to do an A, B plot and sometimes a C plot in a significantly shorter span of time without it feeling like things are rushed necessarily. So I think it's very compact and efficient storytelling.
And it's a bit of a balancing act. Not only are we getting these sort of 4 main characters and them interacting with each other, which certainly helps because you can sort of, you know, piggyback the stories if you have 2 of them in one. But they're also still doing a decent job of fleshing out Freeman. They're doing a job of fleshing out Ransom, of Shax, of Tana, of, you know, all these sort of ancillary characters are getting a little room to play too. It can be, again, challenging to have a decent sized cast. You know, we saw that on something like TNG where they had, you know, sort of 7 primary actors, and they're sort of, some of them are the whole crew, but a lot of it's just sort of like, okay, it's your turn to star this week. It's your turn to star this week. This one, they've done a better job, I find, of really sort of intertwining all this stuff. Especially, as you say, Jaime, within the time limits they're working with.
It's just, and then throwing in all the sort of side jokes and bits and pieces that, you know, the Easter eggs all the way through it, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna miss it. This was again, this has quickly become probably my favorite of all the new Treks. It's just so funny and just sort of, you know, it really does add a breath of fresh air to the Star Trek universe, especially the new Trek, which has been at times a little bit, you know, grim, especially, you know, first season of Discovery, and some of that stuff was, you know, it's pretty heavy stuff. So this has been a really nice sort of palate cleanser for the Star Trek stuff.
Yeah.
That being said, we're about to creep into, the sort of the ongoing as we get Prodigy coming up. We've got Discovery coming up. We've got Picard coming back. So we'll see how this all sort of flows. If it, really changes back to being more grim. And then again, we talked about that trailer for Discovery. It doesn't look like a barrel full of laughs.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on to our watch list then. So what do you got for us, Jaime?
Yeah, there may still be people on this planet who have not seen Squid Game on Netflix.
I haven't started watching it.
Okay. Well, see, this is for people who haven't. So I feel good about choosing it now. There are people who haven't seen Squid Game. So this is a TV series out of South Korea, where the basic idea is that there is this nefarious shadow organization that recruits people who are down on their luck. You know, they're very desperate for money, and they recruit them to play these what are deadly children's games, with the idea being that the last person standing gets millions of dollars as the prize, right? So it's something that you might think of from like Battle Royale or the Hunger Games. There's other things that are kind of similar in the same sort of setup. This is really well done. It's very fun. It's a very easy watch in terms of bingeability, although it does get pretty dark, so be aware of that. It is a violent series, and my sort of tie to the hip pick is that if that doesn't satisfy your deadly game show lust, you should also check out Alice in Borderland from Japan, which is also available on Netflix, that has a organization that is having people play these deadly games kind of concept. Very different flavor. I think you could watch both and not feel like they're the same thing. Any comments, folks? Certainly you've probably seen the memes of Squid Game on the internet, and I very much expect that for Halloween this will be a popular set of costumes, because not only are they easy to do, you can do it more or less with things you can find at the normal store. It's also very practical, having a tracksuit or a hood or a hoodie, a green tracksuit or like a bright pink hoodie with a face mask and a PlayStation symbols on it for Halloween when it gets cold is pretty good combo.
Yeah, I must admit I've seen the trailer on Netflix, and I've certainly seen it gaining momentum around the social sphere in particular this last week. Although even in the mainstream media, it seems like it's picking up a lot of steam too. I don't know. It is a fictionalized sort of take on a reality style game, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where my disconnect happens is like, I don't generally care for reality programming. And I find the whole like, Fear Factor, Survivor, how far will you go kind of concept in reality gaming to be kind of distasteful. So I guess that's where my disconnect is on like, is this something that I would enjoy? Or is this something where, because that's where my appetites sort of wane, am I going to be like, this is not for me?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have a good answer for that, because for me and my significant other watching it in our household, we would talk about the games sort of as a like, well, what would have happened here? And it would have been like, oh yeah, I totally know how to win this game. Or in others like, oh man, I totally would have died. There's no way I would have survived that game. Right. So that's sort of the angle we took on it. But if reality TV show stuff, which this is kind of like that. It's not a reality TV show, just to be really clear. But it is sort of that sort of angle to it. It's not exactly the Great British Bake Off, right? It's more more dark, and it is like Fear Factor, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stories, a lot of shows like this in the past. I mean, Cube was one from the 90s, I think. It was a movie like this where these people are stuck in the situation and they have to get out, and it's deadly. And then there's The Platform, which was at TIFF last year, where I think it came to Spanish film, but I think it came to Netflix recently as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's where my mind went on that one, Tim. Because I remember you describing The Platform, and this sort of same to that same sort of vaguely dystopian, exploitative kind of, taking advantage of the weak, punishing the wicked kind of. I don't know. Maybe that's just sort of a modern theme in storytelling, but yeah, that's right where my mind went on this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So cool. You would say thumbs up, Jaime?
Oh yeah, I mean, if it's something that you can get into, it is definitely a solid show. It's very well done. I'm trying to think of. It's really difficult to describe without getting into spoiler territory. It is very serialized. It's one story all the way through.
Is it like Parasite good, like in terms of where the story goes? And
ooh, interesting. Yeah, I'd say it's pretty. I'd say it's pretty solid. It's not exactly Parasite, but it comes from that same kind of feeling that I think is interesting to look as an outsider of like, this is what South Korean artists are talking about, the wealth disparity in their country, which is at the root of Parasite and is definitely at the root of Squid Game.
Yeah, that was the part that I'd seen commented online was, the fact that it is interesting that this is something that people are really focusing on is the class system and the separation between the wealthy and the haves and the have-nots. And yeah, it's interesting that that's sort of a theme that's in these two very popular pieces of South Korean culture right now.
Yeah, interesting. Cool. What else you got for us?
Something a little lighter. It is essentially a 10-minute Rick and Morty episode, the great yokai battle of Akihabara. It is all in Japanese, so it's kind of an anime as well. It's very well done. It's fun. Basic idea is that Rick's toaster is broken and he needs a special screw or nail or something of some sort that is only made to exacting specifications in Japan. And they go and then have a Rick and Morty adventure. Yokai are like demon spirits, supernatural entities, if that helps you understand the title a little better. And Akihabara is it is like the anime and video game neighborhood capital of Tokyo.
Yeah.
So is this a legit production, or is it just like a fan?
No, I think it's made by the Rick and Morty folks themselves. It's more anime style as some of their other I don't know how and why they do these. Adult Swim puts out these on YouTube. They seem to be actual legit things. I don't know if they're considered canon, but they certainly fit in with. They're well done. They're different artists. They fit the style of the show, even if the art style changes a little bit. But it's definitely recognizable as a Rick and Morty content. And
some of them are. The Australian one is bizarre.
Which one was the Australian one? I don't remember.
That's the one where they go to Rick and Morty go to Bendigo. It's like this really weird. I have it on my iTunes. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I'll look it up right here while we talk. But that was one of the weirdest ones. I just remember thinking like, I think it was basically another show, and a show that I'm not familiar with, that picked up and did sort of their take on Rick and Morty. But it's still a Rick and Morty episode. So let's see, what's it called? It's called Rick and Morty Bushworld Adventures.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that one.
Bushworld Adventures, now celebrating its 10th season. We join Rick and Morty as they seek out this mysterious green cube of Bendigo. Will they succeed? It's all done in the animation style of this show, Bushworld Adventures, which again, I'm not familiar with. And all with these like thick Australian accents. But it's clearly Rick and Morty, and yeah, it's very, very, very weird. But it's the same thing. It's like a 10-minute episode. It's all set in Australia, but it definitely relies on the knowledge of the Rick and Morty relationship and universe.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think it was one of our picks many episodes ago, right?
Yeah, like 3-4 years. I think it came out in 2018 or 19 or something like that. Yeah, like a ways back.
Yeah, I think these are kind of like the Star Wars Visions-esque kind of different artists' take on the material.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I'm definitely gonna check that out.
Mm-hmm. I started watching it, but then I realized it was 10 minutes long. I didn't have 10 minutes to watch.
Yeah, that's another thing. Sometimes I see this, the great YouTube algorithm is like, show this thing. I'm like, oh, cool. Here's like a 3-minute short. And this one's like, oh, this is like half an episode right here that I'm getting into.
Yeah. Well, I went with the obvious this week for our watch list, which is Star Trek Prodigy. That's coming on the 28th of October. It is going to be an interesting experience, no matter how you slice it, just because this is very different than anything we've seen in Star Trek before. It's not Lower Decks. It's not that sort of comedy take in animation. It seems like it's much more like Clone Wars. We talked about that previously. It's a little more sort of an animated show, maybe targeted more towards younger adults or teenagers, but a little more sort of a younger person's view of the Star Trek lore and universe, but not certainly as outright funny or goofy as Lower Decks is intended to be. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how this actually is realized, if it is something that is for all Trek fans, or if it is, something that's sort of a niche. I also wanted to mention, I didn't bring this up in our headlines. I thought I'd save it for here. There was a few more casting announcements made at New York Comic Con. They did announce a few more cast members. So Daveed Diggs, Jamila Jamil, Jason Alexander, and Robert Beltran are all coming to the show. It says here that Diggs is going to be voicing Commander Tysus. Jamila Jamil, who famously was Tahani on The Good Place, is going to be Ensign Essentia. Jason Alexander is, of course, George from Seinfeld, is going to be voicing Dr. Noom. And Beltran will be reprising his role as Star Trek Voyager Commander, in this case, Captain Chakotay.
Cool.
So if you needed a couple more reasons to watch, and I don't think the three of us needed any more reasons to watch, but I like all those performers, and I think...
So will he be a hologram too, I wonder?
I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I am kind of hoping that they have Captain Chakotay and Ensign Kim coming back just to continue the meet.
Still an ensign,
and even better in some sort of way. If he is a hologram, he's like, what the, forever an ensign? That's messed up.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of which, I saw a really bad Star Trek, I guess, fan movie directed by Tim Ruck.
Oh,
the guy who played
Tuvok,
Tuvok, but it stars Walter Koenig and Nichelle Nichols. And Harry Kim's in there. The guy, Garrett, what's his name? Garrett Wong. He's in there as well as a few other names from, and the goofy captain. I think he was from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. The kid with the Ferrari.
Alan Ruck.
Ruck, yeah. He plays the nincompoop Boimler like captain, right? Yeah, so I watched a few minutes of it. It was it's very painful, but it was. I'll have to put a link here in the show notes. But that was sort of a weird one. Anyway, so I didn't mean to steal your Prodigy thing, but
no, it's okay.
You mentioned Harry Kim, and that reminded me of that.
Yeah. The other one that I wanted to sort of tag at the end here, and I just saw this on the same sort of thread. They just announced that Hawkeye, which is coming on November 24th, also high on my to-do list, is going to premiere with 2 episodes on the first drop day too. So I'll just throw that out there for you guys. We were wondering if it was going to wrap before Christmas. It sounds like it seems to me like that might be the trick, is to try and get it to wrap before Christmas.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, my pick is for fans of the More Than Just Code podcast and
sorry, what's the name of the show?
More Than Just Code podcast and Spotcast, right? Oh. But not so much the actual show, but the after shows, because they often, between Mark and Jaime, they often devolve into American football chat, and with you and Jaime, they've often devolve into American football chat and baseball chat, and now we've got the whole hockey thing with the Kraken. So Brent Goldstein, who plays I can't remember his name, but Roy Kent.
He's there.
Yeah, Roy Kent.
He's there. He's every Blankenware.
Yeah, Roy Kent. He plays Roy Kent. He's also a writer on the show, which I didn't know.
He is, yeah.
He actually writes his own character. Yeah, he was on Seth Meyers' talk. I just found this here. It was probably from just after he won his Emmy. He came on the show and did an interview bit. And of course, I think Seth Meyers and Jason Sudeikis were sort of from the same ilk of same generation of Saturday Night Live folks, right? Really interesting. He talks about writing. He talks about it's a really funny bit at the end the interview with sort of a series he wrote and acted in himself about sort of a dating show for pandemic people, where he starts off, he decides to have a dating show, but of course nobody can come into his house, so he dates ball and plant, right? So he has a potted plant and a ball with a pair of sunglasses on it, and goes on a date with them, and anyway, it's kind of a funny thing, but the main bit I put on here was when they started talking about football, or American football versus soccer, as they call it here. And he starts going on about he doesn't understand American football. Like, you play for 2 minutes and then there's like a break and then there's like a commercial and they come out and they fire t-shirts at you and then they play some more for another 2 minutes and then they have another break and he's like it's a genius game. He has no idea what's going on, and yet Americans can follow it through 2 hours of them playing a 20-minute game kind of thing, right? And baseball, same sort of deal, and then he says like this, they got this Jumbotron thing where if you appear on the Jumbotron, you have to turn next to the person next to you, and even in this Me Too thing, Me Too generation where things are inappropriate, you have to start making out with the person next to you kind of thing. Like, it just doesn't understand. But anyways, it's a hilarious little video. I think you should watch it. Just a cute little, interesting little interview of a British person's perspective on American sports, right? Especially since he plays, an iconic character in a British sport, right? So check that out.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I can understand what he means, having watched the Kraken's home opener, and I was a bit lost on several things that I'm sure we'll talk about in the after show. But I can understand the cultural differences, if you don't grow up with it, are astounding.
Yeah,
and I'd like to tag up our episode, bookend it nicely by saying the Kraken won their very first game tonight. They beat the Nashville Predators 4-3. Congratulations to you, Jaime, and your beloved adopted home.
Thank you.
Right. They carry on the tradition. They're going to go for their second Stanley Cup.
That's right. Yeah. Seattle, City of Champion, that one time in 1917.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So, hey, Jonathan, people want to get in touch with you. How would they do that?
You can always find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPK News.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
Right, and my name is Timmitra, Timmitra, and you will find me on the Twitter machine. And that's where I'll hang out. And until next time, we'll see you in the future. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Spockcast podcast. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spockcast website at spockcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at Spockcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpockcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spockcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spockcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
So seriously, what do you need a riding crop? It's like, what does God need with a starship? What do you need a riding crop on a spaceship
Well,
for?
if you're a horse rider person and you have, does he have long boots on too?
No, he's wearing a Star Trek uniform.
Okay, but no riding boots.
Yeah, I don't remember what his his go to warp signature thing. I don't engage or punch it or yeah. I don't know if he's got the riding crop. Yeah. I don't know what his was, but I can't think of what else he'd use that for.
Oh my gosh, that's just, honestly, it's one of those ones in the moment I was like, that's kind of weird. It never really sort of dwelled on my brain, and now it's just never gonna leave. There are 5 lights and a man with a riding crop.
Yeah, I don't know if it was like a weird power move thing of like, you're in a tense confrontation with like the Klingons or something, and you just got to be like, I will beat you with this. And like, what are you doing? We're like, Starship. No, I'm gonna have my engineers find a way to either bring you over here or bring me over there. I'm gonna beat you with this club because I'm tired of your nonsense.
Yeah, this is the same guy who was like so confident at one point. He's like filing his nails while he was like dismissing the Enterprise as this old dinosaur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just crushes that scene. It's so funny. Jaime, did you catch up on Foundation?
No, I will probably see that and several other Apple TV Plus shows. I'm not currently subscribing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Ted Lasso season 2 is on the list.
Yep.
You should
catch up on that one before it gets spoiled, because there's just a matter of time before the spoilers start.
Yeah, did you watch the last one yet, John?
Yeah, actually, Sherry and I talked about it. Should we wait until Xavier comes back and when he was headed back off to the wilds of Riverdale, we decided, you know what, let's just watch it. So we watched it, and it's definitely lots of stuff happens in that last episode. That's all I'll say. Lots of stuff.
Yeah. I wasn't too thrilled about the end of it.
Well, you're not supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be building towards the future, just like this one for Lower Decks, right? It's about building for season 3, 4, whatever.
Yep.
Foundation though, I'm really digging it. I'm actually really enjoying it. Again, I think it helps that I am coming in with a bit more of a cleaner slate. I'm not certainly pulling at any threads. I'm really just trying to enjoy the show for what it is. But I find that the acting is interesting. I find that the sort of puzzle box of it is kind of interesting, and I find that the visuals are really, really interesting and unique. It's definitely not a sci-fi world that I don't feel like it's derivative in a lot of ways. So much sci-fi, especially sci-fi that's building on its own canon, is so derivative. This is something that's very, the technology seems unique. The look, the costumes, the hair, it really does feel like something different, which is kind of nice. But I definitely am looking forward to seeing where it continues to go. Are you staying up to date on it?
Which one?
You, Foundation.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm all caught up.
And are you enjoying it, or are you still pulling the threads?
It's okay. It's okay. I think it's diverged. I actually want to go back and find an audio copy of the books and just sort of sit down and reabsorb them. Because they were very, very much written in the style of, like I said before, the sort of 50s, 60s pulp fiction, right? So so there's probably a lot of loose ends that they're sort of taking liberties with, you know.
Yeah.
So the general gist of it is pretty much the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're gonna thaw out a character as based on what I saw in the end scene there on the last episode, right? So
yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see where they go with this. As I say, I don't come in with the institutional knowledge or all the expectations that, you know, when we talk about that, we talked about Wheel of Time, we talked about so many of these things that are based on, you know, beloved books or beloved comic books or beloved properties, and certainly I have biases based on my sort of deep well of comic book knowledge, where, you know, that's, you know, they've actually changed that for the better, they changed that for the worse. But I find with the Foundation, because I am sort of free of that, I find that I'm able to just sort of sit back and be like, well, where are we going?
Yep.
It is a little bit devoid of humor. That is the one thing. It's not like Game of Thrones was very dark and very, you know, savage at times and stuff like that, but there was always those sort of moments of levity. This one's been pretty heavy. Like there hasn't really been a lot of like ha 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 yet at all.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's hard to see where it's going to go. Like I said, you know, it could end up being like a quite long running series, but who knows?
Yeah. I mean, I guess we'll see. It's hard to say. Obviously, with these streaming services, you never know how these things are performing up to the expectations, and it doesn't look like it's a cheap show.
No, definitely not. I mean, you know, the whole Empire character is a bit strange, but you know,
yeah,
like I said. Yeah, I think the story was a bit more. I mean, I went back and I recently went back and like within the last 10 years went and finished the rest of the I think they're called Galactic series, because there was actually the Foundation series and then there was the Robot series books, and then, you know, he went back and before he died he did a couple of prequels and sort of tied everything together, and then there was also a Galactic series where he talks about the sort of the evolution of the Empire over various planets, right? Because each planet, like in Robots of Dawn, each planet has a sort of, it's almost like a different country sort of thing. Like, you know, countries have differences, cultural differences.
Sure.
He explores that because, you know, people like on Earth, the Earth becomes so radiated and you know, the ozone layer is completely gone or whatever. Basically humans have destroyed their own atmosphere, that they all live underground in caves, right? So the first story is called Caves of Steel, and it's about, you know, this detective who, you know, does explores things, has a crime to solve, sort of similar to what iRobot, right? But the movie, but he's sort of solving this thing as, you know, I guess that's where the Will Smith character comes from, is from Caves of Steel. Now I think about it. And then the Robots of Dawn is the third book, but in this one, they go to another. The same Earth detective goes to another planet, and, you know, has to deal with the people in that planet, sort of thing. And they're sort of the more advanced, you know, planet. They're like the LA of planets. You know what I mean? Like it's where all the money is and stuff like that, right? And sort of the part of the whole Asimov, you know, universe. Different planets have different sort of levels of wealth and success and stuff like that, and it's basically people have ruined Earth so much that they had to go and find and populate other planets, right? So
yeah, well, it's a familiar, well-worn tale in science fiction, right?
Well, it's also in human history too. Like, you know, we couldn't, you know,
overpopulate Europe.
We found the New World, and we went,
yeah,
go to the New World and exploit that, and, you know, the same thing with the indigenous folks here. Migrated over from Asia, you know, because they had to follow the herds, right? So who kept running away because they kept trying to kill them, right?
Pretty soon we'll be chasing those space whales out into space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we'll never know, but it's fun for sure. Yeah, it's good to see where it's going to go. See, I mean, they have hit on some of the points, right? There should be a historian character that comes up, you know, at some point in the first series, I would think. Because he plays a sort of pivotal role in future books, right?
Yeah, I think it'll be. I think it's one of the parts of the storytelling, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything to say that it's a long story. It takes a period over a long period of time. I think that's an interesting part of it. I think that's part of what is drawing me to it, is the fact that it's it's not just, again, a week in a life or a year in a life. It's years, it's generations. It sort of is telling this very sweeping, grand story. And the way that it's sort of connecting it through all these different threads is well done to me. Interesting.
Well, and I suppose you could sort of pull it apart too, like the main character in episode 2 and 3, I think it is. What are we? Are we 3 episodes in?
4. Yeah.
4. Yeah. So 3 and 4, I guess. The main character there, is she like the first generation of the people who landed on Trantor? Because it's supposed to be 50 years in the future, that one, right? From where the story starts. But, so I mean, like, are her parents people that came over on the original voyage, right? Sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, you get the pompous, aristocrats, and as you typically do, right?
Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, it's enough that I'm probably going to still hold on. I thought, when Ted Lasso got to the end of its season, that I might pull the plug on Disney Plus or Apple TV Plus for a while, just because I'm not watching a lot of other stuff. I've sort of dipped into a few areas, but I thought, I could certainly take a break. But I think I'll probably hold on till the end of the season.
Have you watched C and Morning Show?
I haven't watched C. I haven't watched Morning Show, and I haven't watched the one you guys recommended, the one in the video game world,
Mythic Quest.
Mythic Quest. That's the other one. Those three are sort of on my radar of like, well, maybe while I still have it, I'll dip in. It's just it's finding the time because they're both into multiple seasons now, and it's sort of
Servant is pretty interesting too. That's 2 seasons in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The new Tom Hanks movie looks interesting too. It's sort of Chappie meets The Postman.
That's next week, I think. It's coming out.
Yeah. Finch. Is that what it's called? Finch.
Yeah. I watched the 6th Star Wars Visions today. Interesting style.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, I think just to follow up on what we were talking about before, I have my subtitles on, so the surprisingly the audio is in English.
Yeah, it's funny because we watched those first 2 in English, and I was like, oh, they've got like A-list actors to do the voices. Like, this is pretty great voice cast for the first few episodes. And then I was like, this is weird. And then we went back and watching in Japanese. I'm like, actually, this just clicks better in my head. But of course, they're Japanese voice actors, and they may be famous Japanese voice actors, but I wouldn't know the difference. But I am curious, having watched a few of them in English and seen, Alison Brie and Neil Patrick Harris and other sort of famous voices. I'm curious to know who else did the later ones too. I'm meant to look that up.
Let's see, so you're on 6. So you watched the Astro Boy Mega Man one. So the next one, The Elder, I think is one of the more solid ones. That's one of the ones I liked out of the second half of Star Wars Visions. Number 7.
Which one is that?
You said you just watched 6, right? T0 or TOB1?
Yeah. The little kid. Yeah. The little robot who wants to be a Jedi, right? Have you watched them? So what style is that? Like, have you
that
watched that one?
Reminds me of Mega Man, if you've played the video games, or Astro Boy, if you're aware of the 1950s anime.
Yeah, the old man in the Astro. Yeah, the Astro Boy one is pretty close to that one too. Yeah, I used to watch. I haven't seen the movie Astro Boy, but I used to watch the cartoon.
Yeah, the dubbed cartoons were here when I was a kid. We used to watch that all the time at the cottage. Astro Boy. It was one of the cheesier sides of that.
I used to watch Ultraman on TV in the afternoons after school.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was always fond of Battle of the Planets, which is Gatchaman in Japanese. Oh, cultural appropriation. Back in the good old days. And for anybody who's really excited, as I am, feel free to tune in starting on October the 26th for the 2nd season of the Canadian Health Information Podcast. Ready for a excellent season 2. We have now completed the first 4 episodes in English and French, and are gearing up for a busy fall of podcast goodness.
I didn't realize you guys were chips. Like Eric Estrada.
We are, as a matter of fact. That's our acronym. We did a big scan when we first sort of launched it. That was the idea of doing the acronym was one of our previous communication team members came up with that, and we were like, that is genius. Absolutely, we're going to be the chip. So, yep. Yeah, we cool. A couple of really good ones to start. We've got the first ones we did interviews with a pair of, one in English, one in French, Indigenous health experts to talk about the state of Indigenous health in Canada. And then we did the second episode, we've done interviews with Andre Picard, the Globe and Mail columnist, talking about how he uses new technologies to reach his audiences and the ethics of reporting information on the social media and the internet. It's cool. We're going some cool places this season, kids. Tune in.
Chips.
The Chip. Wherever you get your podcast.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, and by the way, if anybody is listening to this, if God forbid Tim includes this in the podcast, if anybody is, there's an overlap between the Spotcast, MTJC, and Chip crowds, I would love to know that you're out there.
We don't even know if there's an overlap between MTJC and Spotcast, but
yeah,
I think there is.
I've seen a few comments in our friends of the show Slack where people are sharing stuff back and forth. I know that we happen to have one fan of both shows currently in your home.
Cool.
He's
behind on his episodes, though.
He's always, in the camp of Jaime is actually a computer-generated character.
Is he? Oh.
Just
there is no Dev with the hair.
He was asking me how tall you are, Jaime, the other day.
I am 5'7" to the top of my skull. Because people get confused and assume I'm much taller. The hair adds, depending how long it is, you're talking 3 to 5 inches.
Yeah.
So I might hypothetically appear to you to be 6 feet if you're, if I've let my hair grow long and.
So does your hair touch the top of your car, like the hood of your car?
The roof, that becomes a time, like a cat's whiskers, and I realize there's limited space here, and I need to deal with it.
Yeah, I very rarely drive with my hat on because cars used to have sunroofs, and the roof interior roof would be lower, right? So
I have the opposite problem of you, Jaime, because I'm legitimately in real life 6'2", but I'm bald as an eagle, so I haven't.
I was going to say, how much taller is your hair make?
Well, that's it. Both my sons, my younger son is legitimately taller than me now at 16, but even Xavier, my older son, is optically looks pretty tall just because he's got a really good head of hair on him, and he's about the same size as me, so he just looks taller, which good for him. Also, I'm shrinking, I'm told. The boys remind me of that constantly. Oh, how old are you now? You're in your 40s? Oh yeah, you're definitely shrinking now. I'm like, thanks guys.
Really?
Start measuring the space between your vertebrae as
yeah. I go to sleep on a rack every night trying to keep up with these two.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised. I was just doing something with my younger son this week, and he's starting to just ever so slightly look down when he looks at me. I'm like, damn it! I think he might have clipped past. I knew he was already 6'3". I think he's getting closer to 6'4", which is just insane.
Wow.
Yep. He's a big one.
Wait, parting question to help my hockey enjoyment, because it's probably hard to Google. So I'm unclear on the legality of catching the puck, as seems to happen quite a lot, compared to a soccer style boot, as the Kraken lost to the other night, and whether or not it is possible and legal to do a soccer style header of the puck into the net, even though that's obviously ill-advised.
The puck has gone into the net off of the back of people. It's bounced in off of referees. Yeah. It's like it is possible.
It has gone off people's faces, like legitimately.
I don't think you're. Yeah, there was a rule at one point. You're not allowed to direct it with your foot. Like you're not allowed to kick it into the net.
You are allowed to direct it with your foot. You're not allowed to make a kicking motion.
Yeah, you can't. Your foot can't move. And the catching thing is it's a defensive play. Obviously, a lot of times people will catch the puck and drop it to their stick. That's a legal move, but you're not allowed to throw it to somebody. You're not
allowed to pass it with your hand, and you're not allowed to. If you catch it, your responsibility is to immediately put it back down onto the ice. So you can reach up and you can catch it.
Only goaltenders can hold it.
But you immediately have to put it back down on the ice. You basically have a second or two grace period from the referee. Anything longer than that, they'll call you for delay of game, because you're essentially just skidding around holding the puck, which obviously is both unsafe because people will take a swing at you, and also is pretty sketchy because obviously puck's not on the ice, you can't play it. So
I see.
Yeah, and rules have been changed over the years because of players who take advantage of them. Like for instance, if you like it, you can imagine it's very easy to make the mistake of firing the puck over the glass, right? But there was a goaltender in the 60s named Gump Worsley who would regularly, we call it clearing the zone, when the puck comes into the defensive zone, the defensive team tries to get it out over the blue line so that the advancing team has to go back out before they can bring the puck back in again, right? So we call that whole sort of series of getting it out is clearing the zone, right? But what he used to do to clear the zone is he would take the puck and he would fire it up over the glass, right? Just to, as a defensive move. In his mind, it was just get it out of the zone and then they can't score on me, kind of thing, right? So now you get a delay of game penalty if you even accidentally fire the puck out of your own zone over the glass, right? So there's a lot of weird rules like that. Like the one thing you've missed is, again, if you watch the hockey, the people's history, you'll know that initially the forward pass was an illegal move because it was based on, hockey was also based a bit on rugby, right? Which is why we have body checking, and it used to be that you had to pass the puck behind you. You couldn't, like, you could skate up and you could throw it to somebody who is like, some degrees behind you, but you couldn't pass it forward. They changed that rule sometime in the 50s or 60s, I think, right? And then they had a 2-line pass rule where you couldn't pass the puck across 2 blue lines, or 2 lines, I think it was. Like
any 2 lines on the ice, the blue lines or the red line.
Yeah. But they've eliminated that, right, John? We don't have that 2-line rule anymore.
No, you can make a breakout pass across the 2 lines.
And that's to increase scoring. Like, 10 years ago or so, they reduced the size of goalie equipment to make it easier to score because they were finding that goalie equipment was getting out of hand.
Well, the 1990s were really, between like 95 and 2005 was kind of a dark age for the NHL because the goalies were the most talented they'd ever been.
Yeah.
The technology was the best it had ever been, and the equipment was the best it had ever been, and it became really, really hard for anyone to score. So in the 1980s, to win the scoring championship as a player, you had to have like 100, 150. Wayne Gretzky scored 214 points in a season once to win the scoring title. By the time we got to like 2002, people were winning the title with like 90 points. Maybe pushing close to 100. Like, it was really cratering.
That's like, what, 80 games or something like that?
82 games, yeah. So yeah, they really had to focus on like, well, how can we open the game back up? How can we do things to increase the competitiveness and give people what they want? People like seeing their goalie get a shutout, but not every damn game.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like soccer. You know how soccer you can have 0-0 games and people are totally happy with that, right? In hockey, people want to see scores. They want to see goals, but unlike basketball where it's like ridiculous, right? Like I can't follow a basketball game because it'll be like 35-42 and like it's still a close game because it's going to end up like 100 and something, whatever, right? Whereas in hockey, you can win a game by scoring 1 goal, right? And I've played many a game where the score was 1-0, or like, if I played a game and we lost 3-0, I would remind my players we lost when they scored the first goal because you guys didn't score a second goal, right? So it didn't matter how many goals. They could get 20 goals. The first goal is the one you needed to beat me, right? To win, right? So, yeah. So it's like I always remind people too that the puck is made of rubber; it bounces.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the football. That's the exact thing about football, right, Jaime? Like football is a weird shape for a reason. It is supposed to be unpredictable. It is supposed to do weird things. It's supposed to make the game that much more challenging, right?
Yeah. So I'll see just given the first 2 games for the Kraken. So they have scored 7 goals. They've also allowed 7 goals, which is why they're 1-1. I will eventually see some defense, I think, but I do not understand what defense even looks like in a hockey game, considering that I've seen
it doesn't matter how many goals. It doesn't matter how many goals you score in total or how many goals against you let in, right? You only need 1 goal to win a game.
Yeah, but the measure of a quality hockey club is that generally you have higher goal scored than goals against, right?
Yeah.
So if you want basically a broad look at how well your team is doing, obviously there's points in the standings, there's how they rate against their competitors in their group and everything else. But if you want to know broadly, is my team, doing better than worse? Usually that's a good metric. Are we scoring more than we let in?
What's the general plus minus for a player? Like,
it depends. Usually the winner of the plus minus. So a plus minus, I don't know if you're familiar with that stat. They have it in basketball too. It's basically if you're on the ice when the other team scores at a regular advantage. So if it's a 5-on-5, you have your 5 skaters, they have their 5 skaters, you have your goalie, they have their goalie, and they score, you are -1 for being on the ice when the other team scored. If you're on the ice when your team scores, you go +1. And a measure of a good, successful season for a player is that you finish more in the pluses. That way you identify that you were not a liability on the ice and that your line was
and you get more money at the end of the contract and stuff.
So a best player in the end of the season with his plus minus would be in the +30s, and the worst is usually somewhere in the -20s, -30s.
Todd Gill?
It's the Todd Gill Award. You're right. It's the Todd Gill Award. He was a defenseman for the Maple Leafs in the 80s and 90s who, to be fair, his team was a dog poop in front of him, but he was typically on the lower end of that scale every year.
Yeah, and the whole assist thing gets a little weird in hockey too. Like
primary assists and secondary assists, and
often, now they label them, but often you'll see goaltenders who have points because they were the last person. They were like the second last person to touch the puck. Like they gave it to the guy who skated. Like if you gave the puck to Bobby Orr and he skated across the ice around everybody and put it in the net, the goaltender would get an assist, right? So there have been a couple of goaltenders who've scored goals by actually firing the puck up the ice, right? The other weird thing too, Jaime, is a goaltender is not allowed to skate across the center red line.
Yep.
Right. So I actually scored a goal once because I was playing once with a bunch of other people, and I skated up, and it wasn't a full game. It was like a practice, whatever, and I beat the goal.
Wait, so when they go empty, just to end this, because I know it's late for y'all. So if the goaltender cannot go beyond the center line, when they go empty net, he's really just hanging out there hoping
that's a different rule. It's a different.
He's just hanging out there close to the action, but not actually in the action for that part.
He's getting ready to run to the boards, yeah.
So if they decide to go with an empty net, that means that they get to pull him off the ice and substitute him with a forward skater as opposed to him. That's the strategy: is you pull your goalie out, you replace him with an offensive player, and that way, because there's no rule that says you have to have a goalie in net. It's just that you have to have 6 skaters. You don't even have to have 6 skaters. It's that you can have up to 6 skaters. So
they can be all forwards too if you want.
Yeah, so you can pull your goaltender out, you can put a offensive player in, and it increases your likelihood of trying to score. The problem is that you've got a big empty net at the other end. The other team can then take free shots at.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So it's specific to the goaltender that he himself cannot pass. But if it was another non-goaltender, they can go everywhere.
Yeah, they put that rule in place probably 20 years ago, and it was to do with the fact that there used to be goalie fights. So there would be, times where, especially in a heated playoff series, there were some pretty bad ones between Detroit and Colorado and a couple of these sort of rivalry groups where when a fight would break out, it would break out usually down at the end of one end of the ice. There would be 5 skaters on 5 skaters, and the goalie would skate over and try and support one of his teammates, and the other goalie would skate all the way down the other end and start a fight with that goalie, saying, you guys have a 6-on-5 slugging advantage here. And the NHL was like, you know what? We cannot have our goaltenders skating the length of the ice to start fights. So they basically changed the rule to say, hey, by the way, you can't do this anymore. If you skate across that line, you're immediately ejected from the game.
Okay.
So it's supposed to keep those line brawls under control, keep them from having 6 guys punching 6 guys in hockey, which doesn't happen all the time, but in that era, it certainly was happening more.
Yeah, but the coming back to the goaltender equipment thing, they talked about making the net bigger. It's 4 by 6 feet, but not measured in meters. But thankfully, they never did that because they had some pretty weird ideas about that, right? So
I thought some of those. Were good.
I have NHL regulation gloves now, and I feel like I'm wearing kid gloves. They're so much smaller, right? So
yeah. But then there was a time where, I mean, I could see it in recreational hockey. Again, I dressed to the nines playing that.
There was a guy, goaltender, look up Artur Zerbe. He was a little tiny guy, but he had giant pads.
And a giant set of shoulder pads and a giant helmet and a jersey that was 6 times the size of him. And
there was that guy who used to play for, I think it was like Anaheim or something like that, who had huge equipment, like huge chest protector.
Yeah, Philadelphia had a really infamous, gigantic goaltender at one point. But that was the problem, is that they were basically letting guys sort of do all these different tricks to try and make themselves into, the old joke, the sumo goalie in the net. And it was becoming, kind of comedic in that, there was no way in no world did you need a device that big, but they were doing it. So then they started putting all these rules in, and then the goalies were complaining like, oh, it's not safe for me, I'm getting hurt. Like, your uniform is made out of Kevlar. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. But it still hurts when you get hit by a puck, even with equipment.
You know what makes it hurt less? Huge paychecks.
That's true.
That's what you were missing, Tim. You were missing huge paychecks.
That was my problem. Yeah, the huge paycheck. Yeah. Well, it's funny, though, as a goaltender, like, it's sort of an unwritten rule as a goalie, and even in pickup hockeys, you generally don't pay to play because where are you going to get a goaltender, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there was a few leagues I had to pay, but for the most part, I never really had to pay for hockey in all the years I played.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That's been your Spotcast hockey update. We're here for you, Jaime. We've always got your back. If you need a little more, we're here for you.
I appreciate it.
So when you're ready, for the understanding, it's funny. The very first time I went to a hockey game with Carol, right, Jonathan's mother, she said we went down to New York City, and she said, what should we do tonight? We can see a Broadway play, or we can go see the Rangers play. I'm like, what? Wayne Gretzky was on the Rangers at the time, right? And this was my 3rd or 4th time seeing him play live. He was an amazing guy to watch live. But so we went and we talked to the concierge at the hotel and found out where to get tickets, and so we went and saw the game, and we're sitting there in Madison Square Garden, right? The hockey game starts, the puck drops, and they start skating around, and I look over at Carol, and she's got this real confused look on her face, and I said, "There's no play-by-play announcer at a real game." Just go, oh, okay.
That's true. No stories about talking to the coach. What's this dude's deal? Is he okay? How long is he going to play? It's just like, nope. General announcer in the arena telling number 45 coming out, 2-minute penalty.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you can actually hear the hockey. You can hear the skates on the ice, and you can hear the players talking to each other, right? So, which is something you totally miss on, unless you do like that. Sometimes at the All-Star games, they put a microphone on players, and you'll hear them talking, bantering, as they're playing. But yeah, it's a really interesting game when you're on the ice or you're close to the ice, hearing that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really weird. And then then there's nothing like a playoff game. If you ever go to a playoff game, I think I saw Ottawa. Was it you and me, Ottawa versus Toronto one year, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the loudest room I've ever been in my life. Like, it was just
the playoffs,
so
right?
loud.
That was first round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
I went and saw Ottawa, Toronto on a Saturday, and in the playoffs. That was crazy. It was electric.
Phenomenal. Yeah. The whole room, it was like you imagine what an EMP or static electricity. It was just like this entire mass.
20,000 people
hysteria.
Just yelling and screaming and cheering and in the heartbread of hockey.
Yeah.
It was a good atmosphere, a hell of a place to watch a game.
Yeah.
If you got a lot of money.
Yeah, they're expensive tickets. Anyway, well, I wonder what the tickets prices are in for the Kraken. I don't know. Might be worthwhile. Maybe it might be cheap enough to get a plane ticket. Cheaper than the Leafs, Well,
that's always the joke, right? Especially here in Ontario, it's actually you can catch cheap flights down to Florida for like $100, like nothing. The joke was that you can take a cab to the airport, take a flight down to Florida, buy a pair of like front of the glass tickets to watch a Florida Panthers
from a scalper.
A Florida Panthers or a Tampa Bay Lightning game. Take a cab back, take a flight back, and you still won't pay as much as you paid to sit up in the nosebleeds in Toronto.
Yeah, it looks like right around the rink, like immediately is like you're looking 600. Looks like the minimum.
Wow.
And then the nosebleeds Looks like 450 is the lowest I've seen so far. Okay,
Wow.
this is a
So
single
I
game
flipped,
ticket. Hold on, but this is like the first game though. Let me go to like November. Because
It'll always be that for a first game for sure.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, it's like
Are you looking at
200
scalper
for
prices, or you're
the
looking at
like section 212, which is nosebleedy. What about here? 256, 225, 200.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It'll come down over
about
time,
200.
right?
Yeah.
I sent a link to Tim the other day. I don't know if he flipped it to you. I was thinking I should get it to you, Jaime. One of my pals lives out there, and one of them posted on social. I have a few friends who work at Microsoft and a few different places in Seattle. One of them posted that he bought like a block of tickets and was willing to part with them at like fair price or whatever ticket price. I think I sent it to Tim the other day.
I don't think you did.
Okay.
In Seattle?
Yeah, it's one of the guys who was is one of Darren's closest friends out there. I sent an attachment. It says right here. I sent it to you on Sunday at 5:14.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we went to spam because
it's on Messenger. On Messenger on Facebook.
Oh, Messenger.
Yep.
Oh, who reads that?
Yep. Well, because that's where I saw it. Because that's where he posted it.
Oh, JPK sent it. Oh, is that what that was? I thought it was a virtual arena. That's what I clicked on.
It is, but I guess this is the view of where his seats are, so you can see.
Oh, I see that. So that link. Oh, that's like right on the glass. Yeah. Row C.
Yeah. So if you want, Jaime, I can send those to you if you're interested in trying to get to a game, because you might have something that would be a little more affordable.
It'd be interesting to check out. I still wonder. We're in kind of a weird mess. There's a whole battle over vaccine mandates for first responders and schools and etc.
Yeah.
So I might not mind going to like an empty nosebleed section, like the crappiest seats that nobody wanted and to cut off to ourselves. But
well, we can't all have the empty IMAX theater to ourselves. That's only for the lucky few.
Yeah. Man, see, 2 weeks passed already. It's only a month away till I can watch Shang-Chi. So time goes fast. When you get older, kids, time goes fast. Trust me.
Yeah.
And just for reference, the last time Jonathan sent me a message on Messenger was January 12th, 2021.
Well, we tend to be a little more communicative than that. So, yes, that's probably the last time I sent you a Facebook message. Usually it's, hey, have you seen this random thing on Facebook? Even then, I usually just sent it to you on either Slack or on iMessage.
The most annoying thing that I have on Facebook right now is somehow More Than Just Code ended up having its own identity on Facebook. So the More Than Just Code podcast page. So every now and then I'll get like a link and I'll click on it and it takes me into Facebook and switches me over to that other account. I wish I could turn that off because if I'd known whatever button I pressed to turn that on, I'd make it stop. Like it's the most annoying thing, I don't know how people why would they think this would be an enjoyable experience for people?
Yeah.
To have your account hijacked every time you touch your phone, right? So stupid. Anyway. Okay, kids.
Cool.
Talk to you later.
See you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Bye.
In the future. You mean in the future?
Oh, that's right. See you in the future.
Okay, bye. I have too many computers open right now. Where's the off button?
Stay a while. Stay forever.
Yeah, bye.